I grew up in Monticello, Georgia, which is a small town about 90 miles south of Atlanta. My paternal grandmother was the daughter of John S. Williams. He died long before I was born. But I heard from my uncles, from my father, from people who knew him, that he was a wonderful man. He was well respected in the community.
In 1921, almost 18 years after the peonage trials, federal investigators visited the Williams farm to follow up on reports that he was holding peons.
There's a group of black men out in the field. The men are obviously terrified, unwilling to say almost anything. They're emaciated. They clearly have been terribly abused. John Williams suddenly appears.
He pleads that he didn't know this was against the law, that he'll do better. His intentions were good, very apologetic to these federal officials, and they leave. And he doesn't know what they're going to do. He knows they found evidence that he was holding these people in slavery. He talks to his foreman, Clyde Manning, and says, as the court transcript said, we've got to do away with these boys.
The family story was that he had worked prisoners on his farm, that they were hardened criminals and they had been put in the penitentiary for a long time. And one night, a lot of the prisoners tried to escape. And he, along with other farmers who were working these men, tracked them down and in the process of recapturing them, killed some of them. Then sometime later, the story came to light for me. It was, of course, totally different from the story that I had heard.
Williams and Manning, the black foreman, systematically hunted and murdered 11 black workers. Some were bludgeoned. Others were weighted down with chains and forced into a nearby river. Another was made to dig his own grave.
They did it in the most horrific ways that you can imagine, that I really can't talk about. I just get so emotional. I think about not just the fact that these men were murdered, but the cruelty with which it was carried out. And that's what's hardest for me to imagine and hardest to accept.
And it came to light only because a little boy was fishing down by the creek where they'd thrown some of the bodies, and one of the bodies came up.
In the spring of 1921, Williams and Manning each faced an all-white jury in a Georgia state court. Both were found guilty and given life sentences. Within a decade, both had died in prison. Williams was the first Southern white man since 1877 to be indicted for the first-degree murder of an African American. It would not happen again until 1966.
Wow. Context of white supremacy, indeed. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, June 4, 2026. So I have been told. One, for folks who might be thinking, oh man, it's going to be the regular Thursday neutralizing workplace racism and tips, suggestions for dealing with racism on the job, which is kind of what we are talking about with this debt peonage system, kind of what we're talking about anyway. But for people thinking that's what we would normally be doing on Thursday, just a switcheroo for this week. Gus T got a little discombobulated. I explained that before, so we did neutralizing workplace racism yesterday, Wednesday, but this is not permanent. This is a one-time thing. So if you missed out or looking forward thinking, oh man, we're going to do neutralizing workplace, it'll be back to the normal time and place next Thursday. Just a one-time thing for this week. And even the fact that the program happened today, kudos to our guest for being patient. And then also, man, I thought I was going to be in a little bit further outside of the greater Seattle area today because there is a paramilitary trial that is taking place or about to take place involving this band of race soldiers, and they are accused of stealing all these weapons and having all this racist paraphernalia in their residence, along with firearms and all the, and right in my backyard, no less. And they were scheduled, their trial was scheduled to commence basically this week. And so I was all excited, go cover it. I've done that, was in court this time last year in Milwaukee, so get some more courtroom experience. But of course, that is one thing that you will learn quickly doing court coverage: delays, continuations. Oh man, they generally do not just whiz through. Like, we gotta slow things down. So ends up going from starting this week to starting in November. So again, thanks to our guest for being patient, because I was all thinking we might have to juggle around and reschedule and can't do it and blah blah blah, and then whammo, no trial and wait till November. Back to that later. Anyway, our topic for today, you heard in the snippet that we began with, this is Georgia history. In fact, if you've been listening to the Cows, we've been here for 17 years. Douglas Blackman was a guest on our broadcast way back in 2010. He wrote the book Slavery by Another Name. Exact same subject matter, and Georgia is one of the key regions that he focuses on in that book in terms of all these vagrancy laws and racist chicanery to get black males in particular. We're going to get you locked up and on the chain gang and slavery by another name. But he was on the program before. And even, I think it's important, relevant, we are reading Lion Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, where she does talk about the debt peonage system. So I guess lots of overlap in things that we have been discussing recently, or even for a long time here at the Cows. But this 1921 in Georgia massacre of 11 privileged black males in Jasper County, Georgia, and even, in fact, before I get to our guest, if you could kind of keep in mind, maybe I could give a word to think about for this broadcast. Fear. If I could be more specific, even though that's my word, fear. If I could be more specific, black fear of white people. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing talked to us about that before. Dr. Kamal Kamban. Other individuals have said, hey, that's something we should be honest about. We being black people, non-white people, victims of racism, have legitimate reasons to be fearful of white people given what has happened, but that's something that should be discussed. Maybe even generational trauma and fear of white people. That is a massive component of the book, unless I didn't read it correctly, and we will chat it up with the author immediately to get me set straight if I didn't read it right. The book we are discussing, Hell Put to Shame, the 1921 Murder Farm Massacre and the Horror of America's Second Slavery. This is a pretty recent book. I don't know if I heard other folks, Cows listeners, chatting about this book specifically, but I do know we have a number of listeners, investors even, who live in the Atlanta region, used to live in the Atlanta region, have relatives and such in the Atlanta and or Georgia in general. This might be a book you should read and or talk to other, at minimum, if you have attempted family and you spent time with friends and such, you go out and you know people in Georgia, Atlanta area, Jasper County, ask them, do you know anything about massacre, murder of some black dudes in 1921? Have you heard anything about that? And just see what they say, and then you can get to this book. Joining us for this evening, again, after lots of patience, we are so grateful. Joining us live to discuss his book, Hell Put to Shame. Our guest, Mr. Earl Swift. Mr. Swift, you're with us, sir?
I am. How you doing, guys?
I'm hanging in, patient, thought I was going to be in court, but enjoying talking about your book. And hey, even we still get a big court scene or 2 or 3 of them in the book, so I didn't miss out after all. For our listeners, this might be their first time hearing about you, Mr. Swift. Anything that you would like to share with us about who you are, the work that you do briefly before we get to Hell Put to Shame?
I live in Virginia, in the Blue Ridge, west of Charlottesville. I've been a reporter, editor, columnist for newspapers. Did that for about 30 years. I've written 10 books. Hell Put to Shame was my 9th. It came out in 2024. And it was a story that I stumbled on back in 2006. And have worked on it in between other projects for 15 plus years, and finally put it together completely. And yeah, I mean, it's not a specialty of mine. I'm like most journalists. I'm a generalist. So my 10 books are widely varying topics. The book before Hell Put to Shame was about the last 3 Apollo missions. So that'll give you an idea. But this story captured me from the moment I found out about it. And we'll talk a bit about the introduction that you had. That sounded like Lawrence Fishburne doing the narration. I don't know if it was, but he misstated something there. He talked about how this was the only case in which a white man was indicted for the killing of black people between 1877 and 1966. And that is one of those weird little factoids that is completely untrue, but that has been repeated in book after book after book. Yeah, you see that in any article about peonage seems to repeat that myth. It's not true. It was bad. Very rarely did whites have to answer for any violence against black people through World War II in Georgia, but it wasn't so bad as that.
Strive for accuracy. Much obliged for that, Mr. Swift. That is same thing I said for me as we're chatting it up this evening. If I misstate, if I didn't read correctly, if you don't think fear is black fear of white people is a major part of this book, then you set me straight as we're going. If you would allow me, if I can rewind a tidbit, you said, unless I didn't hear it, you correct me, you said it took 15 years of you working on this book in between other projects, and you've published almost a dozen books. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I started working on this, I had published 2 books, and 6 others came along while I was working on this one. So I hijacked my daughter's spring breaks and summer vacations to go to Georgia and do research down there for several years, and just worked around her schedule and worked around my schedule to stories. It's like the end of 2008. So that freed me up quite a bit, but only so much because I had projects that I had to get done sooner. And it was always a bit of a question mark as to whether I could find enough about this to actually do it justice in book form. The reason being that, and some of your listeners will not be surprised to hear this, sad though it is that record keeping when it came to black affairs in the Deep South was non-existent, practically speaking, all through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and so I had some real worries that the smattering of newspaper stories that I ran into on microfilm might be the only thing I could dig up. And I got lucky that was not the case.
Not to bog down on this, I'm just curious, forgive me, was it just that difficulty in getting information so that you could write a complete record about what happened here, or was it just you had other books, other projects, you're a journalist, you have a full career? Was it just you had to find time to get all this together, or was it kind of those two factors together?
It's those two factors together. I mean, when you're dealing with a century-old story, you're not going to have eyewitnesses to help you. You can't interview folks who can put you there, so you have to do what you can to turn up documentation. And as I mentioned, in the case of black affairs in the Deep South in the first half of the 20th century, that documentation simply did not exist in any sort of easily retrievable form. And the census being a fine example. You can find every white person in Georgia no problem in the census in 1920. It's really hit or miss as to whether you're able to locate black residents of the state using that document. So I had to get creative in how I dug up stuff. And you also have to understand that this has been, or had been, as erased from public memory in Jasper County and all of central Georgia as it was possible to be before I came asking questions, nosing around down there. And to the point where, there was a pauper cemetery in which all 11 of these victims are probably buried. And no one can point out where that pauper cemetery is. I have my own theories. I think it's probably been paved over. But it's just vanished. There's no record of where these people were interred. The court transcripts disappeared from the clerk's office back in the late 90s, supposedly. And so, they've just plain disappeared, and they can't explain it, and they don't bother to try to explain it all that hard either. It's so you're up against some challenges just in the reporting of it.
Thank you for indulging my curiosity, Mr. Swift. Look at that. I thought I was missing out on court. No way. And haven't we heard that before? Transcript. I thought that's supposed to be an official court document. Where did it go?
It is a court. It is.
Who knows?
Yeah, just vanished. It was stolen from the court clerk. Stolen or misplaced, and if it's misplaced, that's as bad as being stolen, because the courthouse, the court clerk's office has moved a couple of times since then. There's been a flood that wiped out a lot of records, and God knows where that transcript is, but it's not where it should be.
I think you said it correctly the first time, Mr. Swift. Stolen, maybe misplaced, but yeah. I think you said it correctly the first time. For listeners, we've heard this before with important cases, particularly regarding racism, where, hey, the transcript isn't even there anymore. And not even ancient cases. If you want to say, well, man, this is oldie and this is before the Depression. We got cases that are way more current where the exact same thing happened. Anywho, one more quick one before we dive into the details. There's so many, stories about debt peonage and black people being, either you're vagrant or whatever, you got in a bar brawl, and so we got to put you on the chain gang. What specifically, you're all the way in Virginia. What specifically latched on to you about this 1921 incident in Georgia that you said, oh man, I got to go investigate and kidnap my daughter to go research and, invest 15 years. What about this story?
Well, I did not kidnap my daughter, but I'll tell you how I found out about it. I was in the library at Old Dominion University in Norfolk doing research about the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1921 for a book I was writing about the history of American highways. That book came out in 2011. It's called The Big Roads. And I was looking for this little brief in the microfilm of the New York Times back issues in March 1921. I knew that there was a brief, a little tiny, maybe 3-paragraph story that had run somewhere deep in the paper. I didn't know what day, but I figured it had to be in March because I knew that's when this act was passed, this bill was passed. And it was important that I find it. because this is the most important piece of highway legislation ever. And it was completely ignored at the time. And I knew the Times had covered it, but it had done minimal coverage. And so I was looking for this just to illustrate in this other book how insignificant it seemed at the time, this very important piece of legislation. And as I was going through the Times, and because I didn't know what day it appeared, I had to go through each paper and really study each page on the microfilm. And I kept on running into these stories splashed across the front page of the New York Times talking about this trial underway. First of all, an investigation, then a trial underway down in central Georgia, in this place called Jasper County, which I'd never heard of, in a town called, well, actually it was in Newton County the trial was. It was in a town called Covington. Had never heard of that. And this trial involved something called peonage, and I had never seen the word before, and I had no idea, I'm sad to say, what it meant. I had no clue. Very quickly, as I read the first of these stories that I ran across, I realized what it was, that it's where we got the word peon, and that, it was a scourge that basically enslaved tens of thousands of people long after Appomattox, for generations after Appomattox, and really wasn't dealt its final death blow until World War II. And I was gobsmacked. These stories outlined a series of crimes so gruesome, so horrific, and so methodical, that it seemed to me this was a story that everybody ought to know, and yet I had never heard anything about it. Couldn't imagine how that was. At this point, it was under 100. It was like 85 years after the fact. It wasn't yet 100 years after the crime. And the more I read, the less I was interested in the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1921. I started just reading from issue to issue of the Times as it followed this court story, and came across references to a murder farm, which is a phrase you don't see every day. And it became clear that the defendant in this case was someone you would not have expected to see in that role. By reputation at least, the wealthiest landowner in Jasper County, the most prosperous farmer there, a planter. He was bigger than a farmer. They called him a planter. He owned 1,100 acres in the middle of the county, in two big patches, and he and three of his grown sons managed this property with the help of a large cadre of black farmhands, some of whom were regular employees who actually lived on the farm and had lived on the farm with their families for a long time, and some of whom were peons, hired on an as-needed basis. Hired, of course, being in quotes, because none of them were paid. And, as I continued reading, I was stunned to see that this man, John S. Williams, 54 years old, had murdered 11 of his members of his workforce, had wiped out pretty much every peon that he could pin down on his property. And I realized, man, this is a story that needs retelling. And so that's what got me started.
Hell put to shame, Mr. Earl Swift. For folks who've not seen you, or maybe they're late getting the book, you are classified as a white man. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Right on. All of our guests, and particularly for a story like this, we start off, I use the term racism and the term white supremacy. I use both those terms as synonyms, same definition for each. That definition, a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
Oh boy, yeah, I think in general, I'd say that squares pretty well with my own views. It's a little far afield from the subject on the table right now, in the sense that I was careful in putting together this story to make it clear that although this story has ramifications far beyond the cast of characters involved in it, my focus was, I kept the lens focused on this particular case and how it represented the wider abuses of peonage all through the South. The Southern culture back in the 1920s, even the most what we would consider progressive whites living in the Deep South in the 1920s were by and large what we would consider racist in one form or another today. There were a lot of folks who really beat the drum for political equality among the races, but who, even while they did that very stridently, hesitated, if not opposed completely, the idea of social equality between the races. So in other words, it was fine in their view. In fact, it was imperative that black people get the vote, but it was not imperative that black people be able to swim in the municipal swimming pool. So it's, now you can say, well, that's racist personified. There it is. And it is, especially by the standards of today. But I think that if you were to transport yourself back to 1921, you would find that there were there were black people who felt the same way. They were uncomfortable with the idea of social equality, and this was a really, we think that we have problems with race today. The late teens and the early 20s, the few years on either side of World War I, were especially vicious when it comes to racial violence in this country. Maybe the darkest period we've ever experienced as a country. The struggles of the 50s and 60s pale by comparison. You look at one year in particular, 1919, the Red Summer, when a series of white on black race riots killed a bunch of people in a bunch of different cities, and not all of them were in the South. There were a lot, So this is something that was geographically widespread and was nuanced. There were shades of progressivism and shades of backwardness and shades of racism.
Hang on a second there, because I did ask about my definition, and now we veered off into shades, and I definitely did not ask about shades. I'm not even really sure what that is. I just want to go back, number one, that term darkest time, point out that word usage, metaphor. But I also want to go back, because you just said that word geography, and we are very familiar with the white supremacist violence of the summer of 1919. Cameron McWhirter was a guest on our program. We talked about that in detail, way beyond the so-called South, Arkansas, Washington, D.C., Illinois, widespread.
Chicago.
I am fast-forwarding to the end of your book, Hell Put to Shame, because you said in your answer when I asked about my definition of white supremacy racism, you said, yeah, it mostly squares with my view, sounding like there might be a caveat to a degree. And then you said, well, I don't really discuss, that's kind of beyond my field. This is limited to this incident in Georgia and the U.S. I do want to fast forward to the end of this book, just my definition, global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing, hang on one second, and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. And I am skipping all the way to the end of the book because this is going out of order, but I just think this is important. So you wrote at the end, this is chapter 37, transported to farms in Georgia, Florida, and Texas, the government alleged these victims were stripped of their passports and visa documents, forced to perform work with little or no pay, housed in wretched, overcrowded trailers and fenced work camps, and threatened with violence. Some victims were raped, and the indictment asserted 2 died, all of which is to say that peonage today, as in when this book was published, 21st century, has morphed into a complex international undertaking. If recent cases are a guide, it can involve extravagant organization, millions of dollars in loot, and large numbers of victims. Fraud and money laundering often figure in the crime. That said, Johnson, White, and Dorsey, that's rewinding back to 1921, would recognize it, and the same goes for John S. Williams. It remains an almost inconceivably cruel, brutal enterprise. It continues to prey on the poor, the disadvantaged, the downtrodden. It reduces its victims to the status of livestock, and most of those victims have dark skin. That sounds like global system of white supremacy racism, which you might be a little bit more informed about than you let on, right, Mr. Swift?
Well, no, it's just that the problem here is that it's not all race based today.
And most of those victims have dark skin?
Most of them do, but not all of them. There are, the modern day peonage also preys on the homeless and on drug addicts who have been plucked out of homeless shelters, and many of those are white.
Gotcha.
So it's not.
You did say most of those victims have dark skin. That right there lets me know this is a very racialized, as it was in 1921, as it is now.
Earlier in that chapter, if you read carefully, it also says that it does not prey upon African Americans.
I didn't even say that. I said dark skin.
I know,
that's what you wrote.
I know.
Non-white, and that's what my definition said, non-white.
Now, those dark-skinned people tend to be Thai, Indonesian, Pacific Islanders, and the reason that they are targeted is because they have visas, and those visas are the leverage with which the folks running these peonage operations keep them locked up.
Sound like Mr. Johnny. It sounds exactly like Mr. Johnny from 100 years ago, unless I misread. And exactly as you described in the book, I can even rewind the way that you talked about the usage of laws, that the way that white people, racists, skillfully would use vagrancy laws in conjunction with, we go out and police. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, you don't have a job? You can't prove your whereabouts? Oh, there we go. Bang. It's the same principle. We can go out.
Well, vagrants, the black codes, as they were called.
Right.
In the South, interlocking. There's no question that white legislatures throughout the Deep South engineered those specifically to ensnare black, and mostly young black men. You didn't see many women falling into the peonage net. That they were aiming for young black men. They were looking for free labor. What they were looking for, Gus, is a continuation of slavery. They wanted free labor on which the South's economy depended, and that's how they did it. They did it this time legally, in quotes, by building these laws that forced any young black man to have a job, to not leave his job without his employer's permission, and if he tried to leave, he could be arrested. And then you've got another form of hell that he would be put into. So if you've, there's no question that the whole legal system down in the South, and this was true in particularly in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, and probably to a more limited extent, at least in Texas, Arkansas, South Carolina.
Context of White Supremacy. We did have Robert Perkinson as a guest on the program. He talked about his book, Texas Tough, and he describes a lot of the exact same behavior down in Texas. So he would say, oh yeah, we got some of that in Gotta Get Texas. Don't think we missed out. Before I get to, in terms of what, well, I guess you already gave us some of the details in terms of why you wrote this book. I guess quickly, who is Laura LeFay? She's in the dedication. Who is that?
Laura LeFay is an old dear friend of mine. She was the first reader on this book and has been the first reader on many of my books, which is a glorified way of saying that she's my story doctor. She's my editor before the editors at the publishing house get to see the book, and helps me turn a rough manuscript into a polished draft.
Got it. Right on. Shout out to Miss LeFay. With, I guess, one, you already told us you're a white man, and you already told us that it was difficult getting sources for this book, and you had to go snooping around, and it seems like there's been a willful, deliberate effort to erase that this ever happened. We're not going to talk about it, that sort of thing. Did you get any, what shall I call it, resistance? Did you get any opposition, people telling you you should not write this book, you're stirring up trouble, or even people saying that, hey, Mr. Swift, you are a white man and you specifically shouldn't be writing this book because you are white? Did you hear anything like that?
No, not a bit. In fact, I think if any erasure that happened in previous generations, because the reaction that I got from folks in Jasper County today was, for the most part, shock that this had happened. Once I described what it was that I was doing, folks, and this included folks who worked for the county, were flabbergasted that right in their hometown, this had unfolded, and they were eager to help, and that went, that went from the courthouse, where every clerk dropped what he or she was doing to give me a hand, to the sheriff's office. The sheriff actually took a couple of inmates and trustees and did a grid search of a piece of property for me, looking for the pauper cemetery.
What?
And
are you serious?
Yeah, I'm dead serious. Yeah, Donnie Pope, the sheriff in Jasper County, did that, and so no, I was surprised and heartened by the response. People seem to have their heads on straight and their hearts in the right place. The only, I never got any sense that of obstruction. What I did get was a shared frustration from people that there wasn't more on paper to be found, and I got lucky in a few places. I was able to find paperwork sufficient to tell the story accurately. Not to the degree I would have liked, but it's already a pretty long book as it is, so it's probably a good thing that I didn't. I was able to put flesh on the bones.
For sure, delectable Negro, for sure. You said you didn't hear anything like, a black person should be writing this. Maybe one of Clive Manning's relatives or somebody should be writing. You didn't hear anything like that about you being a white person telling this story?
No, and I'm sensitive to that view, and frankly, had I encountered in my research, when you're researching a story like this, if there's somebody else researching the same thing, you find out about it pretty quickly. You wind up talking to the same people, and they mention it to you. You wind up going to the Library of Congress, as I did, and a librarian mentions that they had somebody looking at the same thing, that sort of stuff. So you when you're braiding with someone else in their work. And had I any sense that anybody else was working on this and that person was black, I would have given serious thought to, certainly I would have reached out to talk to that person. And depending on where he or she was in the process, may well have excused myself from it. But the important thing to me was to get the story out there. And as it appeared, there was no one else working on it, and there had been no one else working on it. And it stood to lay fallow for years to come if I didn't just dig in. I decided to forge ahead.
Right on, Mr. Swift, forging ahead, hell put to shame. I guess for folks who have not read this, and since we're talking about 11 murders here, can you kind of set that, because I have specific details about, the characters who get involved in all of this, and most of the book is kind of about what happened afterwards. Can you kind of set the table for us in terms of what happens with these 11 black males on Mr. Johnny S. Williams' property where they end up dying?
Sure. This whole story came to light because in January of 1921, a couple months before, the whole world learned of it, a couple of the peons escaped. Actually, they escaped in 1920, but in early 21, they both wound up at different times in Atlanta, walking into the offices of the Bureau of Investigation, which was the forerunner of the FBI, the DOJ's investigative arm, and talking to a couple of agents. A guy named A.J. Wismer and a guy named George W. Brown were the agents. And they told dovetailing stories about having been picked up on, trumped up charges, vagrancy for one, and I think loitering for the other, and had been unable to pay the $5 fine that they both faced. And so they were looking at 6 months on the chain gang in lieu of that fine, paying that fine. And both were in jail, pondering their fates, when in walked a farmer. Turned out to be John S. Williams's second-born son, Hewland, in both cases. And Hewland said, look, why go work on the chain gang? I can pay your fine, and you can come to work on my spread, working for my dad, and it'll be like a home to you. You'll be glad you did. And, this is 1921. The vast majority of young black men in Georgia worked in agriculture. That was the main occupation of the whole state. And so it did, in fact, seem that this, a benefactor had just entered their lives and was going to save them from a known bad fate on the chain gang. So they went home with Hewland Williams to Jasper County and found very quickly that he had oversold the charms of this plantation. They worked at the wrong end of a gun barrel. They were locked up at night with other peons. They were whipped daily for infractions, real and imagined. They were just, beaten bloody on a regular basis and lived in a constant state of terror. And these guys, there was no doubt in either of their minds that had they been caught while they were escaping, they would have been killed. And they also told the agents, each of them, they had seen other peons murdered by Mr. John S. Williams or his sons. And, one peon showing up in Atlanta would have been notable. Two showing up in quick succession was more than the agency could ignore or put off investigating. So with other business to do down in central Georgia, these two agents, Wismer and Brown, drive down to Jasper County in February of 1921, and they meet with John S. Williams, and he is really eager, it seems, to help them with their investigation, and claims that he, if he's guilty of peonage, every farmer, every one of his neighbors is too, and he didn't know he was doing anything wrong. This is just common practice here, he tells them. And, all the people working on my plantation are happy to be here. There's nobody locked up. These guys aren't prisoners. They can leave anytime they want. And so the agents asked to speak to some of the peons, and they go out into the fields and talk to some of them. And it's obvious that these men are far too scared to say a word. And the agents do see some circumstantial evidence that peonage is afoot. They get to a bunkhouse that that's locked from the outside cannot be exited once you're locked in, and that's a pretty big clue. And so they talked with Williams for a while and basically say, don't give us an excuse to come back here, and they drive off. Now if you read their testimony later on, they had every intention of putting together a case against John S. Williams. They believed that the circumstantial evidence was strong enough, but they also knew that they didn't have a case right then. They needed to figure out a way to get these peons to talk, and that meant getting them away from Williams and his sons, and someplace safe where they'd feel comfortable, and maybe then they could crack the case. But they were stymied for the short term, so they drove off. And Williams didn't know they were stymied. Williams was convinced they'd be back, and they'd be back soon, and they'd take his plantation away, and they'd imprison him and his sons, and everything he had worked for his entire adult life would be for naught. So he decided he should destroy the evidence. So he enlisted a black foreman working for him, a guy named Clyde Manning, who was in a no-win situation. He was basically told by Williams, I want you to help me kill all the boys, as he put it. And Manning immediately said, boss, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to do it. And Williams said, well, that's fine. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, but it's your neck or theirs. So you got to ask yourself, whose neck do you care more about? And Clyde Manning came around to realizing he, not only was he at risk on the plantation, but his mother lived there, his wife and baby lived there, his brothers and sisters lived there. He had an extended family, all of whom he figured would be killed if he didn't go along with the plan. So with Clyde Manning's help, John S. Williams first killed several people on his property. Had Clyde Manning actually wield a shovel or wield an axe or wield some other instrument and bludgeon them. But eventually he graduated to a far more complicated and cruel way to kill off his victims. 6 of them he drove to bridges that spanned 3 different rivers in the next county over in Newton County, and tied them up with wire and chained them to 100-pound sacks of rocks and threw them alive off the bridges into the rivers. And so that's how 6 of the 11 died. And, had he stuck with his original methodology, he would have gotten away with it almost surely, because nobody knew where these guys were. I mean, they had been picked up, on these charges. They had no way to reach their families when they went to the Williams plantation. They again had no way to put out the word as to where they were going. And record keeping was such that often the jail didn't even keep a record as to who had picked up a prisoner and paid his fine. He just disappeared into the void. And so, had he just killed them on his property and buried them, he would have been scot-free. But because he got particularly cruel, because he wanted his victims to know that they were about to die and to suffer with that knowledge for the length of time that it took to drive to one of these bridges, 14 miles, across the county, he got caught because the river ran low. It was a warm spring. The rivers dropped and the bodies came up.
Context of White Supremacy. That would be your black male privilege. That word scared did pop up in the context of Mr. Swift's response. I did say at the beginning that'd be a synonym of fear. That would be the word, and black fear of white people. I said I thought that is a massive component of this book. You give a lot of great detail, context, if you will, for how both for Georgia circa 1921, and then context for how Mr. Johnny's plantation, I'm calling it a plantation. So you give context for how Mr. Johnny's plantation operated, and I just want to read this portion. This is chapter 7. You write, the Williamses would strip the victim and drape him over an oil drum turned on its side, with his fellow workers holding him by the head and feet while the blows came down. His punishers used whatever tools happened to be handy: leather belts, bridles, trace chains. He took off his shirt to show the scars left by the lashings. Dozier also said he had heard that Leroy Williams shot a man, that's Mr. Johnny's son, shot a man named Iron Jaw or Long John during one such whipping. He'd heard that Clyde Freeman fetched wire to tie up Iron Jaw's body before it was sunk in the pond, one of Jackson Lake's slack water coves edging the river tracks. He cataloged other cruelties suffered by prisoners bailed out by the Williamses, among them having to help train the family hounds to chase down anyone who tried to escape. Sunday mornings, I thought that was the Lord's Day. Sunday mornings, he said, the peons were forced to take off running until the dogs brought them down, reinforcing Mr. Johnny's assurance that if they tried to run for real, they would not get far. Brilliant detail, Mr. Swift. We've had a number of programs where we have talked about, and I mean over centuries, racists, white people employing dogs as a form of biotechnology, bioweaponry to control black people from slavery times, all throughout the continuum of whites, even in Ferguson, up to Michael Brown Jr. They were talking about black children in the St. Louis County area. The only people that they sick the dogs on are black children. I even had to pause on that, like, dang, if you're 14 and you skip school, they sick the dogs on you in St. Louis? Like, what in the...
I grew up in St. Louis, guys, and that might be overstating it just a little.
Well, that was a report from the federal government. I don't think the DOJ overstated, because they had documentation, and it said explicitly in writing the only reports they had of dogs, police canines, being used on people, citizens, it was black children. I said, wow, I can't. And this is documented in the video footage. I didn't grasp it at that time. You can go back and see protesters. When Michael Brown Jr. was killed, 2014, you will see black people with little stuffed dogs on. I didn't know what that meant until we had white guests on the program years later to explain this is what they were talking about in that 2015 DOJ report. All due respect, sir, but the dogs being used on the Mr. Johnny's plantation to control, and the dogs come up in your book repeatedly. Isn't that right, Mr. Swift?
Okay. No question. I mean, let's make something clear right now, guys. I mean, the fear was well placed. I mean, if I went back to Jasper County of 1921, I'd be scared. I'd be scared to death because I've done the research that, to the extent that I know what these people were capable of, that they were operating on a completely different wavelength from people today. This was, I mean, all you have to do is look at, oh my God, the Mary Turner story, which is the worst of the worst of the worst. And you realize that this is a feral way to treat your fellow man, and so it's. Fear was a weapon, and fear. If you weren't fearful as a black person in Georgia of 1921, there was something wrong with you.
For sure. I don't know I don't know why Mr. Swift, as a white man, I don't know why he would be fearful. I mean, Mr. Johnny's not coming to get you and have you, as a peon and have the dogs chasing you.
Mr. Johnny's not the only problem. Mr. Johnny operates in the context of a county that views him as its first citizen. When Mr. Johnny died in 1932, and of course he was a prisoner at the state workhouse at this point, and was run down by some escapees at the prison who, and one of the reasons he was run down almost surely is that his job as a trustee at the prison was training the dogs to run down prisoners to escape. But anyway, when he died, the county threw him a hell of a funeral at the Baptist Church in Monticello, and to the point where supposedly you couldn't see the altar for all the flowers. And when you read the Monticello News writing about him, there's this glowing story about Mr. Johnny and all the good he did in Jasper County, and it never once mentions that he was guilty of this crime against humanity, never once mentioned that he was in prison when he died. They kind of conveniently left all that out. So yeah, I would be fearful going back in 1921 because the Jasper County of 1921 was a bloodthirsty, cruel, and vicious place. And I don't think they'd like me very much.
I don't think you'd have it as bad as Mary Turner, since he did mention her. I just want to catch our readers up really quick. I'm skipping way ahead. This is in chapter 12. So they've already lynched Mary Turner's husband, privileged black male. Mr. Swift tells us this news determined the mob to, this is after she has the audacity to be upset about what happened to her husband, uppity Mary Turner. This news determined the mob to teach her a lesson, in quotes, and although she attempted to flee, when she heard that they were after her, she was captured at noon. Hey, that day again, the Lord's Day, on Sunday. The grief-stricken, terrified woman was taken to a lonely and secluded spot, a narrow road over which the trees touched at their tops, which, with thick undergrowth on either side of the road, made a gloomy and appropriate spot for the lynching. Near Folsom's Bridge over the little river, a tree was selected for her execution, a small oak tree extending over the road. At the time she was lynched, Mary Turner was in her 8th month of pregnancy. The delicate state of her health, 1 month or less previous to delivery, may be imagined, but this fact had no effect on the tender feelings of the mob. Her ankles were tied together, and she was hung to the tree, head downward. Gasoline and oil from the automobiles were thrown on her clothing, and while she writhed in agony and the mob howled in glee, a match was applied and her clothes burned from her person. When this had been done, and while she was yet alive, a knife, evidently one such as is used in splitting hogs, was taken, and the woman's abdomen was cut open, the unborn babe falling from her womb to the ground. The infant, prematurely born, gave 2 feeble cries, and then its head was crushed by a member of the mob with his heel. Hundreds of bullets were then fired into the body of the woman, now mercifully dead, and the work was over. And I'll pause there. Now, for this one, there's so much detail. Were you able to actually find some of the describings of what took place with this lynching of Mary Turner and her husband?
Well, what you just read is not my writing. That's Walter F. White's report in The Crisis, the NAACP magazine. And of course, Walter White later became the executive secretary of the NAACP and served in that position longer than anybody else. And Walter F. White, he was the NAACP, the early NAACP secret weapon. He was a black man who looked white. He could pass. And he could pass so effectively that he could insinuate himself into a lynch mob just, while the bodies were still hanging. and get all the names. And then he would turn around and offer that up to the authorities and make a report in the crisis. And the crisis was a spectacular, weapon for justice back in the day, and really a great source for me when I was digging into this. And one of the unsung heroes about this whole case, in addition to Walter F. White, who was tireless in his fight against peonage within the association, was James Weldon Johnson, who was White's boss. He was the executive secretary, the first black leader of the NAACP. Took office about 3 months before the Williams case came to public knowledge, and was just a spectacularly courageous and really smart leader of the organization.
Context of White Supremacy. In giving some of that background information, before I get to James Weldon Johnson and his role in kind of getting some of this information out, what happened with these murders in 1921, the additional context that you provide, I guess maybe you could even add this to maybe why you might feel some level of danger in this environment at the time. I'm not sure, but you talk about what happened with the lynching of Leo Frank. Not that I wanted to get into the details of that because we talked about that case before, but there is one nugget around that case that I thought was important. This is the very last paragraph in chapter 6 where you say, 1,000 or more gawkers ventured from town to eye his corpse, talking about Leo Frank. Many posed for pictures. There were a number of women in the crowd. The Atlanta Georgian reported it was noticed that several of them carried babies in their arms. Woo! I thought that was significant, but maybe I thought it was different for you. Why did you make sure to include that you have white women present for this lynching and with their white babies? Why did you think that went in the paragraph, in the chapter with that paragraph?
Well, the whole Leo Frank case is like any lynching story, is just a portrait of what happens when you get a mob, and Leo Frank, frankly, what happened to him scares me a lot less than what happened to Mary Turner, because with Mary Turner, that's a level of depravity of just complete feral inhumanity that is unimaginable to me. Leo Frank's was anti-Semitism at its worst, but you didn't, at least in the methodology used to end his life. The mob didn't resort to the sort of just. I had nightmares after reading about Mary Turner the first time. I just could not believe what I was reading, and still have trouble understanding it. It's crazy, and hundreds of people were involved, and of course Walter F. White got all of their names and handed them over to the governor of the state, Hugh Dorsey.
I guess for myself, I thought it was important because we are told in these sorts of white supremacist spectacles of violence that this is white men's work, that this is patriarchy, where you make sure, as I said, and you end the chapter on this note that, hey, this is not a homosocial event exclusively for white men. You have white women. You even have white babies present for this. And you point that out a number of times, the presence of even children at these lynchings and at the court spectacle later on. I just think that makes it very important in terms of the entire white collective is involved, guilty, and co-signing on it. This is not something where it's white male patriarchy. White women are right there. Yes, we're going to be front row at the lynching and have our children there on our laps too, while they can watch the whole entertainment spectacle of this.
Well, you've seen pictures of lynchings. You've seen the photographs taken.
Sir.
And you've got a cross section of white folks in terms of age. You've got 12-year-old, 8-year-old boys gleefully standing by with a body behind them. It's unthinkable. But yeah, this was societal. This wasn't just a thing for the menfolk by any means. This was embraced by the society at large. Now, were there white people who denounced it? Were there white people who stood against it? Absolutely, and not a small number. This was the South was not. It's not something you can paint with a broad brush. There were, as I mentioned earlier, there were varying degrees of racism throughout the South. There were varying degrees of progressivism. This was not a monolithic thing.
Oh,
but
well, I'll pause there because I do disagree, and I think your book gives lots of information to support that with regards to white culture, and that's my definition. It is a monolithic thing, if you want to use that terming with regards to white people. Oh, yes, it is. And in fact, white people who do not believe in racism, white supremacy, they are so minute to be statistically insignificant if such people even exist. And you rocked me right to my next question, Mr. Swift, doing it beautiful. Make it easy for me. I could have took Tom Watson because we talked about him a bunch. We've talked about him so much. I'm going to leave Tom Watson for the side. For the people who are slow and don't know who Tom Watson is in Georgia, this is a white man who might be progressive or whatever, not racist on Monday. By the time we get to Friday, I hate more niggers than niggers and niggers. That would be one for why. Come on. It is a monolith. The white people who say they are not racist, give them 5 minutes. I would rather take the person that we've not talked about as much, but we should have, Joel Spingarn. I get back to James Weldon Johnson even. You, on chapter 12, you write, it so happened that one of his regular readers was Joel Spingarn, a white philanthropist, presumably not racist, and the NAACP's chairman on the board who detected in Johnson a figure of potential value to the association. That fall, Spingarn wrote to him with a job offer. He caught Johnson by surprise, but it at once seemed to me he would recall that every bit of experience I had from the principalship of Stanton School to editorship on the New York Age was preparation for the work I was being assigned to undertake. When I read that, I said, man, there should have been another paragraph. Are you aware, there's lots of documentation, there's a whole biography that goes into this on Mr. Spingarn. He worked for the U.S. military, and a part of his role was spying on black people for decades, including the black people that he worked with in the NAACP. Are you aware of that?
What's the major award in the NAACP called?
Well, you're answering my question with a question, so let's do one at a time.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Why did you not include that information in the book?
I'm not aware of it. I don't know that I entirely buy it. I'd love to know what your sources are on it. The preponderance of the evidence would suggest that Joel Spingarn was a pretty progressive guy who, for whatever failings he may have displayed, the ledger sheet I think comes down pretty clearly in the positive on him.
I don't know what that again. If you aren't aware of all of this, that would be one thing, but they have biographies that talk about this. We've talked about, they have reports about this.
Why would the NAACP call its number one award the Spingarn Medal to this day?
What did I say was the key term for this broadcast? That F word, fear. That's what I said. The same logic with the Charles Manning. Excuse me. Well, you're interrupting. Let me get 1 second. You're interrupting. I'll let you speak without interrupting. I should get the same courtesy. That's what I said is a massive theme in your book. In your book, unless I misread, if black people, victims of white supremacy, can be so terrorized, I'm so afraid of what they did to Mary Turner. Oh my goodness, if all of this can happen, and with impunity, you don't even get a speeding ticket for all of this if you're white. Man, they can terrorize us into killing other black people. What you said, Mr. Manning, they might kill my wife, my children, my brother, all, and me, not to forget all, they might kill me if I don't participate in all that. If there's that much fear, well, I'm going to go help this white man kill 11 black people because I'm scared not to, why would I think black people in the NAACP either would be ignorant, if you say you didn't know about this, would either be unaware of Mr. Spingarn's role, or you had better not say anything about all of this, or else the same power dynamic exists. Why would I think that's not the case, Mr. Swift?
About me?
About the system of
About
white
why
supremacy and the power dynamics that governs what happens at the NAACP.
I'm not entirely clear on what the question is, though. What are you asking me?
You said, why would the NAACP continue to honor such a person, Mr. Spingarn, if he has a legacy of spying on black people? And I said, fear. You don't think that black people at the NAACP might be fearful of calling out, whoa, this is a racist white man that we are honoring, whose whole mission was to spy on and sabotage the NAACP black attempts to counter racism? You don't think there could be some fear involved with not speaking out about that?
I need to know what your sources are here, Gus, because I dispute this whole characterization. I think that this is bogus. I don't know of Joel Spingarn's apparently decades-long campaign against his own organization. This is the first time hearing about it, and I have grave doubts as to its veracity. And so you're going to have to present me with some pretty strong evidence that this is the case, because what I do know about the man suggests that he was a straight shooter and was a damn good leader for the NAACP during those years that he led it, and in fact inspires the organization to this day. And I don't think that you're doing right by the NAACP to suggest that they be so fearful of a past leader. This is an organization that I think, were it to uncover evidence that one of its own had worked against the organization for years, would not hesitate to bring that to public attention.
Okay. Well, number one, Mr. Swift has admitted he's not aware of all of this. That's, you can do your research, as I have been told. Hang on a second. And you're doing that interrupting. If you continue that, I'm going to suspect that you're deliberately practicing racism, because I haven't been interrupting you. I use my mute button. I'll let you speak without interruption. Now, if you want one source, I'm not going to do your work for you. If you can go to Georgia and you can kidnap your children to go and help you do research, you could do that to do research on Mr. Spingarn. There's one book I'll give you, just one. That book, Race, War, and Surveillance, African Americans and the United States Government During World War I. There are more books, and I'm telling you, there are biographies. We here at the Cows, Gus T., biography king. There are biographies on Mr. Spingarn that discuss this in detail. What branch did he specifically work in? The military intelligence branch, where he spied on black people for decades. Now, again, you can say, because you've never heard this, or you might even be deceiving us there, you can say, I never heard this and you're disparaging, blah, blah, blah. This is documented. Folks can check, see if Gus is telling the truth or am I making this up. With regards to the NAACP, I'm just looking at your book and evidence from the system of racism. I don't think any of the black people, at least, who belong to the NAACP, I don't think they're any different than Clyde Manning. If you're a victim of white supremacy, you are subject to the exact same power dynamics as Mary Turner, that you as a white man, suspected racist, said you would be fearful of. Why would I think a black person, just because you magically have an NAACP card, now you are somehow safe and protected from that violence that Mary Turner faced and empowered to speak up? Why would I think that? In fact, sometimes it's the exact opposite. We find out you're in the NAACP. Oh, now we got to get even more aggressive. You might be one of them uppity Mary Turner types that we got to keep tabs on. So, again, but you said you didn't know. Maybe that's one. You can do more research. I've given you a book, and I've even told you what division of the U.S. Army intelligence that Mr. Spingarn was employed in. You can investigate. Is Gus truthful or no? And if it turns out Gus was correct, man, you should be on some major retraction like, whoa, Gus T., scholar that you are, I was wrong. My fault. I'm going to do better. I don't think that's funny.
Well, considering that moments ago you suggested that if I interrupted you, I was branding myself a racist. This has taken a turn I didn't expect it to take us. But I will say, while we've been talking, while you've been delivering your defense of your position, your argument rather for your position about Spring Iron, I've been looking online, and I don't know about this book. I will look it up, but I can tell you that that finding that he spied on for decades, I believe you said, black people and the NAACP in particular, it's not reflected in anything that I'm running into online.
As you're looking online and trying to talk to, next topic, can I get to my question? You can do that later. Once we get offline, you can go look. Hey, you could read one of these books. I don't think you can do that in a constructive manner, in a logical manner while you're talking to us. So you can do that later. You've already stated for the record that you didn't know anything about this. You'll have to investigate. You think Gus T might be lying. No problem. We'll investigate once you're off air and see.
I said nothing of the sort.
Gus T might be in error, making it up, however you want to paraphrase it, that I'm not being truthful. No problem.
Error.
Let's see.
In error.
Let's see. Moving forward to things that maybe you can verify from your book. This is on page 246. Or I guess even before I get there, because I did say I suspect that you could be practicing racism by the interrupting. Do you think that you, as a white man, do you think you are above suspicion from practicing racism, white supremacy?
No.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Of course not. Above suspicion? No. Nobody's above suspicion.
Just making sure. That's kind of what it sounded like for a second. Just making sure. This is a little bit later on in the book. I have the e-copy, so I was going to give out page numbers, but for people with the hard copy, they would not really jive, so maybe I won't do it. Later on in the text, this is chapter 17, when we fast forward, so we start to get to the trial, or I guess trials. So there's going to be a trial for Mr. Johnny, white man, plantation owner, and then there's a trial for Mr. Clyde Manning, who, victim of white supremacy, black dude. They're going to be tried separate. So we have several separate trials as we go on through the book here. During chapter 17, you write, Johnson next called on Assistant Attorney General Graham Wright, asking how he had become part of the prosecution team. Wright testified that he had been assigned the role by the governor, that he was serving as a representative of state government, and that he was paid as such. No private sector money was coming his way. Lonnie Brand spoke up. Do you want to talk about my connection with the case? ? The courtroom erupted in laughter, prompting Judge Hutchison to gavel the crowd to order. I don't want this to happen again, he warned. This is not a minstrel show. Now I thought this was one of the more intriguing portions of your book, Mr. Swift. Now again, this is happening in 1921, and I thought, wow, at this point, like, we don't have Netflix, we don't have flat screens and YouTube. 1921, minstrel shows are this ubiquitous that this can be shorthand for, hey, got all that reckless jocularity. We're going to calm down, act like you got some sense. We're not having a comedy show here. Calm all that down. Minstrel show by 1921 is shorthand. Everybody white in the courtroom understands what that means, presumably the black people too. And better behave. I mean, and this is a direct quote. This is like you got this, I don't know, from the court records or I guess portion of the transcript or what have you. What were your, when you saw this, did this stand out that he would use this sort of metaphor to get order in the courtroom? We don't want this to be a minstrel show.
Well, it certainly was in keeping with the times and the place, and so I can't say it shocked me. I certainly noticed it, of course. Yeah, I mean, and just as a footnote, the whole minstrel show thing has always mystified me. When I was a little kid, we lived in England, and on the, I think it was the BBC, it might have been ITV, the other network over there in the 60s, there was a minstrel show on TV every week in England, in the UK, called the Black and White Minstrel Show. And it was a variety show. It was a musical variety show with people in blackface. It was, looking back on it, it's stunning that such a thing existed, but it did.
It's called, they didn't even have a creative title for it, the black and white minstrel.
No. Yeah, not afraid of redundancy,
What time period was this, just for giggles?
Well, we lived there from 1966 to 1970, so it was late 60s.
Wow. I'm going to have to see if I can find some of these on YouTube or what have. I will say that M word that you used before, there's a whole book that evidences exactly what I said. This too, minstrel shows. There are many components of white supremacy racism. It is a global monolith. White people all over the world love a good minstrel show, love a good racist joke. They have whole books. We've had some of the authors on the program this year for the past 300 years examine the global culture of white supremacy racism through minstrel shows. Monolith of giggles, racist giggles, in fact. Just flipping, like, I guess 3 pages over, we're still in chapter 17. There's some of this is so rich from the phrasing. If we could have got the whole transcript, you would have had even more juicy tidbits in the text here. So you write, that evening, Gus Williams met with reporters gathered outside, part of the Mr. Johnny's clan, met with reporters gathered outside the courthouse, and again insisted that the whole affair was a miscarriage of justice. I can safely say that I have not seen a single employee abused while working on our farm, he said. The Negroes always had plenty of food and were paid fair wages. Of course, most of them lost what they made in skin games, in quotes. They gambled it away, but we couldn't help that. All the Negroes have their skin, and they'll be found playing on any farm in the state. The Negroes that were carried before the grand jury came from convict camps before being employed on our farm, and it is possible they were mistreated there. Anyway, they didn't receive all those scars and gashes while working for us. True, his brother Hulan had killed a black worker, but that had been self-defense. That's what they always say. Contradicting his father, the doctor said the slain man was later buried in a cemetery and a license was secured for his burial, so the killing must have been reported. I'll pause right there. Man, what? The verbiage skin games. What is that, and why did they use that verbiage, skin games? What are they talking about here, Mr. Swift?
You know, I did some digging, Gus, and was unable to get a good answer for that question. I took it for good or ill, and I could be completely mistaken here, to be, if they were shooting dice or craps or whatever, which, was popular among black and white Southerners of the day. But I don't know. Gus, the other Gus Williams there, used the phrase, it's the only time I saw it, the only time I've seen it in print.
Do you have a guess as to why they called it skin? Even he comes back because he said the Negroes have their skin. Like, what do you think what does that mean? What do you think?
I think he's just dropping the word games there. I think he's referring to, but if that was a nickname for games of chance, it's one that I've never heard before. But that's an exact quote, at least from the Atlanta Journal or the Atlanta Constitution. One of those two quoted him in that. If you go back into the notes at the end of the book, it'll give you the source.
Skin, and he uses this, saying that it's not that we do anything manipulative and overcharge them for supplies or lie about, how we're supposed to do the compensation when all this is done and how long it takes them to pay off. If I paid, whatever to get them out of prison, it's, oh no, them and their skin games, we take care of them and they're paid. And if, hey, they go out and lose all them, hey, that's on them. They got their skin. They're like, what? And then, that's why I said, why do they call it a skin game? Particularly in a context where these are dark people who are being mistreated on the basis of having dark skin, they call it a skin game, and then even say that the Negroes have their skin.
See, I don't think that it was and this is again a guess, but just in the context of the quote, I don't think that it would have been a phrase that was specifically and solely applied to black players. I think that skin games would have been a label for games of chance or games, games of skill in which you can lose money or make money. And it's in this context of a very racist set of crimes that it takes on added meaning. But I'm not sure that, just because he used it that way, that it was normally used that way. That would be a guess of mine. But again, I'm guessing because, like I said, I had never seen the term before I ran across that quote.
I'm gonna have to do, and I don't know that I've seen that phrasing before, skin game, or they have their skin, end quote. I don't know that I've seen that before, but these sorts of tricks, or whatever games of chance where you could lose, you can win, that sort of thing. I have heard that in the context of these kind of peonage systems where white people run the games, and even the games are rigged. So whatever we're coming to play, of course you're going to lose all your
exactly. But the fact is that Gus was lying from top to bottom anyway, because they didn't get paid. They had no money to lose. And Gus was just a propagandist for the family. He was just spewing nonsense. He was, everything he said was a lie.
Fat verbiage, words are so important. One of my favorite, I don't know, I can't say favorite. I guess I'll retract. I will say favorite. One of my favorite characters in the book, if there can be such a thing in a book filled with so much tragedy and death, murder, Mr. Manning, Clyde Manning. It is a terrible does not, I wouldn't even know a correct word for it. But wow, I think he's the central character that I think of in the midst of all of this anguish and sorrow. When he goes to testify, not at his trial, when he gets he gets charged for all of this, but when Mr. Manning, the first trial, when he's testifying at Mr. Johnny's trial, when he gets up there, and my word for the program, he says, "Man, I was afraid. You already told us, my family, my wife is on Mr. Johnny's plantation, my children, siblings on Mr. Johnny's plantation, all these people I'm connected. He could kill me. You already told me, whose neck do you value more? He'd kill me. Oh my God, if I don't do this, I don't want any parts of it. But if I don't do this, oh my God, I'm scared what could happen to me and all the people I care about." When he gets on the witness stand and says that, and the defense attorney says, "Man, who told you to say that?" This is what do you mean? Nobody. Did you tell the truth? Who told you to get up here? This is going to sound. That I also found was that one, because that is such a long pattern of racist white people saying that black people are too stupid, too ignorant to come up with a thought on their own. Somebody had to tell you to do this. You're not cunning. You're not smart enough to come up with a plan to do anything. Who told you to even say that? It's centuries of that too, alongside the racist jokes, but him being so, having the self-respect, just no one. Why would I not be afraid given this context? Just can you talk about, and that assertion that comes up repeatedly when these black people come to testify, who told you to say that? You didn't come up with that from your brain. Somebody told you to say that. Can you kind of speak to that, especially with Mr. Manning?
Well, Clyde Manning is the most interesting character in the book by far for me. Because, what he did, what he was forced to do, really forces you to ask yourself, what would I do in that position? He found himself in such a terrible spot. And when he decided to come clean, and he waited a while, as you know, before he decided he was going to confess and tell all. And but when he did, he was absolutely forthright about it. He left out no details. and he came to the trial seemingly impervious to pressure. I guess he decided he'd already done the difficult part. He had talked, and so when he got to trial, he was the picture of poise on the stand, and all of the defense attorney Johnson trying to grill him with that "who told you to say that" business was just. I think it's indicative of the fact not only that you had a black witness testifying, which was a rarity, but the whole almost unthinkable nature of this trial, which was that you had a well-to-do white man being, on trial for murder, and all of the witnesses against him were black. And that just did not happen in the 1921 South. It was really, really, really rare. And it certainly hadn't happened in Georgia. And here it was. And I think that defense attorney Johnson was probably speaking for an awful lot of their neighbors when he asked those questions. I think that was probably a not insignificant view among the white population of Georgia at the time. The thing that got the conviction, I think, was that Clyde Manning did not bat an eye when Johnson asked questions like that. He did not buckle. He stood his ground and answered every question, and answered some questions so beautifully. At one point he was asked, "Do you expect to get an easier time at your own trial for testifying today?" And he answered, "I don't expect anything. I'll take the good and the bad as it comes." And simple declarative sentences that left no doubt as to what the truth was as he saw it. And I think people were floored and very impressed. He became a hero.
Convict, I don't know. I don't know. He is easily my favorite person in this book, but wow, tragic hero. Maybe put that tragic hero.
Yeah, and a hero with condition. There's an asterisk attached to the word hero there, because what he did. Later on I discuss the legalities of the situation, and because it was lousy. He testifies against Williams. He gets the state the conviction, the long shot that it was going for, it gets. And then the state turns right around and uses the very testimony he had used to get the conviction for Williams against him at his own trial. And the same lawyers who had defended him, and really presented him to the world as a courageous and clear-eyed witness, now did their best to tear him down. And so just a lousy situation. But at the heart of it, the problem here is that no matter how scared you are, no matter how much you have to lose in a situation like he was in, losing your entire family possibly to this murderer, you can't take the life of an innocent third party to save yourself and your loved ones. It's the innocent third party part of it that's the sticking point. He could have killed Williams, and he would have been completely justified in doing so. Now, he would have been lynched almost certainly, but he could have done it. And the one thing that gets me time and again, reading, when I was going through the description of, how he and Charlie Chisholm would tie up their victims while Williams was in the car with them. They'd be in the back seat tying up whoever they were going to throw off a bridge. And at that point, there were at least 4 people in the car, four peons, or 4 black people in the car. And everybody knows what's going to happen. Why didn't they kill Williams? And, the answer is, well, their fate would be sealed if that were the case. But their fate was sealed anyway. So I found myself very frustrated at places that Williams lived long enough to kill as many people as he did.
I just, my quick thought before the part about working a Negro and the cunning Negro, those are two massively important components I want to get you to share with listeners. But my quick thought, just the total impossibility of being a victim of white supremacy, where you, and even the lie of choice. There is no option here. So Mr. Johnny comes, look here, Clyde, Mr. Manning, you are going to help me kill these niggers on the plantation. Now he could say, no, I'm not going to do it. Mr. Johnny has already told him, well, that means I'm going to kill you, maybe your wife, brother, children. Maybe I kill you all. Okay, I don't like that. What's the next option? Kill all these niggers, peons. Okay, that's two. We kill Mr. Johnny. Now, even that, it only takes me about 5 seconds to rewind. Don't the dogs live it? Oh, yeah. There you go. Oh, like, we have the way, and pretty much all of these choices end up in the same place. We're going to die.
Yeah, they do.
Like, we have no option at all. It's just a matter of, do we get to kill a white person before we die? Do I kill a black person before I die? Do I just go to death? And even the not fighting back, the dogs. Everything about the system of white supremacy has been designed to condition black people. Don't fight back. That's what I said about the NAACP. Everything about everything about the way people classified as white, like you, Mr. Swift, have designed this system is to have black people in fear, total fear of resisting. You say no to a white person, say no to a white, even if a white person says, hey, you gonna help me kill these people. What? You had better not say no. That's what I mean, that's the system of white supremacy through and through. Like, Mr. Manning, oh my, and all of these black people, what option do you have? Even to us today. Quickly, the portion from the New York World, I just wanted to get this in before I get to the cunning, and then the working Negro. The New York World, where they described Mr. Manning, they said, great quote here, the most important of the bunch, Clyde Manning, stood, as the New York World described him, soot black, S-O-O-T, insignificant, direct quote, before the court. He was visibly nervous, looking one moment at the floor and next to the ceiling, striving, it seemed, to avoid meeting eyes with Mr. Johnny, who sat with his lawyers a few feet away. Seemed like they could have used that F word right there. He was fearful, afraid. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, these white people gonna kill me. But soot black and insignificant. Like, wow, I think if you're soot black, you are insignificant. They got the redundancy again, Mr. Swift. Man, that portion later on in the book. Let's do the work a Negro first, because these are some stunning passages here. I'm so glad you included. I wish we had the transcript so we could have had more. So this is the first one. Now you understand that what I did have, right? You've made several references now that you wish we had. Oh, yes, sir.
We have everything except the lawyer's questions. So we have all the testimony. The brief that was the brief that was prepared for the appeal does exist, and it includes all the testimony, just without the lawyer's questions. Oh, so you have to extrapolate the questions from the answers, but that's pretty easy to do. So so we're not shooting blind here. We've got a pretty good feel for everything that was said in the courtroom that was germane, that was important.
Brilliant. Thank you for my fault. Go ahead.
So then with Clyde Manning's trials, we have the transcripts. So, and in the case of Clyde Manning, of course, his own testimony at the Williams trial is used against him. So it is read into the record at his trial. And so you have a way to double check against the original brief of the court at the Williams trial. And in fact, they are the same. So it just it reinforces the fact that the brief is pretty doggone complete.
Much obliged for the clarification. Great job doing your sleuthing as a researcher. Apply that same diligence to Mr. Springarn once we're done. with regards to working a Negro, you write, listen, man, for listeners, pay attention. So you write, I'm even going to go back and give one extra paragraph. You write, that Peterson and the other 10 dead men were black did not lessen the grievous nature of the crimes against them. The prosecutor reminded the jurors they had the same right to protection in the courts as white men. The state's most important witness was a Negro, too, but again, that did not matter because he spoke the facts. Never in my experience have I seen a more truthful witness, Brand declared. At no time did Manning vary in his evidence, although Colonel Johnson tried for an hour to break down his story. Rena Manning had corroborated her husband's account. She could have been killed. We've been talking about her. He said, and her testimony, too, stood like a rock under Johnson's fusillade of questions. This was a case of a white man recruiting as his accomplice a man who was helpless to do other than what he was told. Gentlemen, I've worked Negroes, and many of you have seen Negroes worked, Brand said, and you know, and I know, that after a man has worked a Negro for 13 years, he can make him do anything. He not only can make him kill a Negro, but he can make him kill a white man. If there was a moment in the trial that underlined the racism baked into every aspect of Georgia life in 1921 or 2026, this might have been it. Even the prosecutor knew how to work Negroes. Even he knew how it was done. Evidently, the remark did not seem all that traumatic to Brand, who pushed on without pause. Now, freed from the influence of his unrestrained master, he said, Manning had shared what had happened to his fellow farm hands in great detail. His story sounded like the truth, Brand said. It sounds like the truth because it was the truth. I mean, wow. Kudos for Manning and getting this out, but I mean, working, it's not just working a Negro, it's that it's assumed every white person knows what working a Negro does. We're not ignorant about working Negroes, right, Mr. Swift?
Well, it's one of many passages in the court record where you have to remind yourself that Lonnie Brand is one of the supposed good guys. I mean, he's actually on the side of righteousness here, and he's still talking that way. And you see it. Well, you see it with the federal agents who broke the case open and who really are responsible for getting it to go to trial. A.J. Wismer, who was a stand-up guy in terms of law enforcement in most respects, at least, what we know, used the N-word flagrantly and did it, officially, did it on the stand, which is, so there are a number of points here where you find yourself thinking, wait a minute, whose side is this guy on? And yeah, the Lonnie Brand speech in his closing was one of those points.
Then that's even, I come back to that monolith. Man, hey, even locally from Georgia, he seems to be suggesting, hey, we got a monolith here. All of us white people, we know what it means to work a nigger. Even that statement at the end, you know as good as I do. After you worked a nigger for 13 years, you can make a nigger kill a white man. What? I mean,
be mindful of the context in that he is talking to a jury of a very specific sort. He's not talking to the Chamber of Commerce in Atlanta. He is talking to 7 white farmers, a couple of shopkeepers, a guy who ran an auto dealership. We're talking a working class, maybe lower middle class whites. And so he's, now that's not to take that I'm not defending Lonnie Brand at all here. Let me make that clear. But in terms of the monolith, again, there are gradations, and to fail to see the gradations is to misunderstand the Deep South of the 1920s.
All due respect, I don't see no gradations. When I look at those lynching photographs, I see poor white people, rich white people, the mayor, sometimes police officers, the police chief, white women, white elderly. Yeah. You got every cross section of the white collective you can imagine. And again, sure. what you just said. So now we got at least 2 examples, and then once you do your research on Mr. Spingarn, we might have 3. So that's Tom Watson, that is potentially Mr. Spingarn, and then the defense attorney who you said was supposed to be one of the good guys. Even they, like, which side is Mr. Brand on? Wait a minute, is he a racist, or are you one of these progressive so-called white people? That's what no, man, the monolith is right there. Mr. Brand wouldn't be saying, we all know. He wouldn't be saying that if the monolith wasn't in Georgia. We all know what it means to work a Negro. Don't we all know what it is to work a Negro? Yes. The section about the cunning Negro. Woo. Like I said, there's so many of these. It is absolutely amazing. Now, this is, I guess, 4, 5, 6, about 6 pages over from where I just read it. You're right. Let me make sure I give the full yeah, we go. This is chapter 24. Those formalities complete, he walked to the jury box. The visit of special agents Weismer and Brown had not produced evidence of peonage on the plantation. He told the 12 the state had failed to establish a motive for John S. Williams to kill anyone. But that visit did give a motive to the lying traitor Clyde Manning. This is all in quotes. When Brown told Clyde Manning that he had lied to him about the Chapman affair, the Negro was frightened, King declared. You lying scoundrel, you lied to me and ought to be hung. That's what Brown told him, and right here, if you are looking for motives, you can have one for Clyde Manning. The field boss subsequently schemed to destroy the 11 Negro hands who might incriminate him by exaggerated stories of their condition of servitude. And after the fact, King said Manning took this motive he had in his own mind and ascribed it to Williams. He was what white planters feared most, a cunning Negro. Oh my God, I cracked up laughing. What is a cunning Negro, Mr. Swift?
You're asking me? Come on,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I don't have any better idea than you do. But I, it's your listeners might benefit from knowing, the defense, like the prosecution in this case, had multiple lawyers, and at the close, the judge allowed each of them to make a closing statement. So Mr. King is one of the lawyers. Green Johnson was the main defense attorney. King is assisting him. He was his law partner as well. And so what you see the defense doing is coming up with a theory as to what motivated Clyde Manning to lie that's different in each of those closing arguments. They're just throwing stuff against the wall to see what will stick. They're just trying to inject. They're trying to give the jury an excuse. That's all they're doing. And so this is a preposterous argument by King, and one that, of course, did not gain any traction. But it's no more preposterous than any of the other stuff the defense was throwing out there, which included that Manning had conspired with Charlie Chisholm to rob several of these peons, and they met their death after he robbed them. He killed them, and then John S. Williams had nothing to do with it. It was just it's just try anything you can.
I will say we call it hypocrisy. Pick a term. At first, it was you are so stupid. You can't even fathom to say that you're ignorant on your own. You need a white man or maybe a white woman to tell you, hey, when you get on the witness stand, tell them you are afraid. You need somebody to tell you to say that because you're so stupid. But then we come back and say, he is the most conniving, cunning Negro you like. Which is it,
That's
man?
right, yeah.
Which is it? Come on.
Pick one. Well, exactly. So you've got Green Johnson making the "you're too stupid" argument, and then you've got King making this one, and the other lawyers, they came up with their own, and none of which held water. They were all complete garbage, and were seen as ridiculous, I think, by most people in the courtroom, including, as it turned out, the jury.
I did want to make sure I got one more, I guess, kudos in for your research on this here report. We mentioned Walter White a few times. You talked about how pale he was, classified as black, but could have passed as a white man, and he used that to his advantage. As you mentioned, going to the different lynchings, he could get all the information and do a great detailed report on it because they would just think he's a white dude, racist, there to enjoy. You included the report, and I didn't even know about all of this, that he was married to a black female, divorced her, married a white woman. That caused a big kerfuffle with his membership in the end. I had no idea, still learning. I got all, and I mean, that's kind of way late in the book as you're kind of going out and all this. You mentioned the report has Science Conquered the Color Line by Walter White in 1949, where he's talking about, it says, a revolutionary chemical compound has been discovered that turns black skin white. When it's perfected, Negroes who use it could pass as whites. I was stunned. Like, what in the world? Like, I'm kind of like both. Can you speak to the controversy that was caused when Mr. White divorces his first black spouse and then marries this white woman, how that kind of impacted his role in the NAACP, and then this report here?
Sure. I mean, it was seen as a tremendous betrayal by just about everybody, white and black, I think. I think white society reacted in shock and dismay as well, because it seemed, wildly out of character. Walter White, he spent his entire life as a general in the fight for racial justice, and was enormously effective at it. He probably, more than any other single person, is responsible for Truman integrating the armed forces when he did. And that's just a tiny example of the sort of things he did. And for him, late in his career, he was always a big publicity hound, to put it unkindly. He loved to see his name in print. He loved to hobnob with celebrities, and he enjoyed writing for magazines. Enjoyed seeing his byline. So the story you mentioned about this chemical compound was a magazine piece that he wrote, and he later claimed that the magazine had taken liberties with the headlines and the whole framing of the thing, and had made it an advocacy piece, a sales job for this chemical that he had never intended. But it came right on the heels of his divorce and remarriage, and the divorce and remarriage had really kind of shaken people's confidence in his judgment. Regardless of whether his new wife was black or white, the fact is his first wife was almost as much a hero as he was to progressive society. She had stayed by his side through thick and thin, for 35 years or something. And then this comes along, and right on the heels of that nasty surprise comes his magazine piece, and people just thought he had lost his mind. And his protestations that had been monkeyed with by the editors did not do anything to help his cause. That no one wanted to hear it, and he was kind of forced out. Basically, he was demoted. He was given a part-time position as a figurehead, as the hood ornament, basically, of the NAACP from that point forward. And Roy Wilkins stepped in and became the real powerhouse.
Thank you for putting the link in the notes for the book, because I was able to get the article. But for listeners, just so you can get a teaspoon of this, and this is from 1949, it reads, people are white or black because of a substance called melanin, Dr. Welsing. It is a dark pigment that makes a Negro's skin black. If you are white, you have less melanin, but you produce more of it yourself when you expose your body to sunlight to get a tan. Workers turn white. The chemical science has removes melanin from the skin. It was accidentally discovered shortly before the war. Negro and Mexican workers in a Midwestern tannery complained that their hands and arms were turning white. Some of the men brought their suit for damages, and their cases were settled out of court. White workers found that they too were affected. They noticed that their arms would not tan in the sun. Investigators of the U.S. Public Health Service then went to work. They found that the workers were wearing a certain kind of acid-cured rubber gloves. With the cooperation of the glove manufacturer, the cause of the discoloration was traced to monobenzyl ether of hydroquinone. This antioxidant has been added recently to the glove's formula to preserve its elasticity and prevent cracking. And they go on to talk about all this. It is amazing. Like, dude, they got pictures of man. And they, even at the end of it, it ends, it says, it will bring a new era. Whatever the results, it is virtually certain that the discovery will bring a new era. No longer will skin color be a criterion of human ability to and acceptance. Monobenzyl may do more for race relations than any other scientific discovery to date. What?
It makes no sense, and it's doubly offensive in that it comes from a guy who could have passed his entire life and was adamant that he never would, that the only times he passed were in service to the NAACP and racial justice. And that just makes it all the sadder that his story ended the way it did, because he was probably telling the truth in saying that the magazine editors took liberties, but to even broach the subject in a magazine story, that was not a story that he had any business getting within 100 miles of. It was bound to do him harm.
They even have a picture of a female here. I'll post the images so people can see this, but they have a picture of a female, the same female, next to Walter White, and they have a picture of Mr. White at the top of the article as well, so you can see him where he looks basically like a white man, but it's got a female, and she's got a bikini on, so you can see lots of skin, like he's been out suntanning, and the caption reads, she has beauty, poise, education, and a lifetime handicap. I thought I said hang up, but same thing. A lifetime handicap. She must buck the prejudice against color. That's what it's got. And they did like O.J. Simpson, so they have this caption under the darker image of her, and then they have her again on the next page, but now she's been completely bleached, so I guess she's supposed to be white. And then it says, the caption on that picture is, will life look brighter to her in the white man's world if she changes the color of her skin? This is the only way we can get rid of racism. All the black people have to bleach themselves and become white.
Yeah, that's the subtext, isn't it? It's unfortunate from top to bottom. Yeah.
Before we let you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, thank you for your patience, Mr. Swift. You later, towards the end of the book, you were talking about the, make sure I give the exact quote so they don't say I'm messing around. You write, the panel left the courtroom and had much to consider, namely whether or not it was possible for Clyde Manning to have felt a fear so strongly gripping as to hold him spellbound while participating in no less than 11 murders of the foulest form. As the Macon Telegraph put it, the jurors would have to balance that against the fact that however sympathetic a character Clyde Manning might be, as a man steeped from childhood in violence and abuse who had spent his every waking moment in fear, and whose long exposure to the trauma of life on the plantation had rendered him an emotional zombie, he was not wholly innocent. What do you mean when you say emotional zombie? What is that?
Well, what it suggests that if you live in a state of terror, and this goes well beyond instances of racial terror, but any kind of terror, I think, prolonged exposure to terror leaves a mark. It leaves a psychological and emotional bruise that you don't just shake off, and it's not something you just rub dirt on and play ball. It's debilitating. It can be. Well, PTSD. It's we see it all the time now, and we have a name for it now. But it's I mean the important part, of course, is that he was not wholly innocent, and that goes back to the point I made earlier that you cannot victimize a third party, no matter how, no matter what you personally have at stake. I'd say Clyde Manning is he's neither all good nor all bad. He's a mix of both. And, you can understand the bad completely. It's all justified. That's the frustrating thing about his story, is that everything he did wrong for a damn good reason. But it was still wrong. And ultimately he went to prison and died of tuberculosis there.
Black male privilege. I don't. If you were on that jury, you could have been. You're a white man, so you could have qualified. If you're on the jury for Mr. Manning, and they say, "Hey, we got to sentence him," where are you sentenced? Are you not guilty? Guilty. He's got to do life in prison. Does he get the death penalty? If you're on the jury, what are you deciding?
I would have pushed for, and this was an option given the jury that they did not take up, but I would have pushed for manslaughter. I would have not have convicted him of murder. I don't think he was guilty of murder, but I do think he was guilty of manslaughter. I would have gotten Williams for murder and the lesser charge for Clyde Manning. But I guess the state, and this is presumption on my part, I think the state recognized that the political winds would not enable them, would not allow the prosecution to go for life in prison, to get a life sentence for a white defendant, and in the same crime, get a lesser sentence for the black defendant, regardless of whether the white defendant was by far the more guilty, which he's certainly beyond debate that he was. I think that they just found themselves in a political corner that they could not get out of. And you and I may disagree on the monolith, but there was enough of a monolith, politically speaking. The Democratic Party ran everything, and back then the Democratic Party was like the GOP of today. It was before they had switched positions completely. And the Southern Democrats, there's just no way that they would have gone along with that.
Just for our listeners, I would switch those terms around. Just the racists in the South would not have allowed a white man to be convicted and go to jail, where basically all of the witnesses were black. Not all, but lots of them. They are not going to allow that, and then turn around. One of the star witnesses who got this white man convicted, we're going to let him walk or go for a lesser penalty. Nah. Like, that is not going to be allowed to happen at all. I would dare say 1921 or 2031.
Say something.
White people wouldn't allow that to happen.
Well, I think I'm not even going to take that bait, but I do think it says something that Judge Hutchinson put it on the table, that he, said to the jury, "You have this as an option." That in and of itself was a shocker in 1921, and it was a recognition that at least the court recognized that these two crimes were not identical. They were a different set of particulars. And
I feel like there should be an insert of duh if we were being honest and logical, but that is not the case in the system of white supremacy racism, unfortunately. Then or now, that is not the case. I guess last one, did those trustees, you said that they were so kind when you were doing your research down in Jasper County, Georgia, and all that the sheriff, he got those trustees to go out and search to see if they could find that gravesite, the burial for these 11 victims. Did you get to see this search, or they just told you about it?
No. It was after I had already made a 2-day search of the property and had found no sign of the thing. I'd been most of my time had been spent in a clump of woods, a copse of woods that had grown up since 1921 at the edge of this property that's now used for a number of municipal services, including the sheriff's office and animal control and a senior center, and the county's Department of Public Works has a big gravel yard on this site. And so I was able to get a hold of the county's land surveyor, and he had aerial photos of the county that had been taken going back to the 1930s. Wow. And shared those photos with me, and I was able to zoom in on this. I knew where approximately this cemetery was, but I didn't know the exact location. I knew that it was somewhere on this municipal property. And so I used these aerials to try to pinpoint it, and came away noticing that there was one square of property behind the senior center and in front of animal control that had never been messed with, that all this change had happened all around it, but this one square of property, maybe a half acre, had never been touched. And so I thought, well, my God, that could be it right there. It's just unmarked. These are unmarked graves. It only goes to follow that I wouldn't have noticed it, So at that point, I called the sheriff and asked if he would consider going out and having a look. And I had visited him when I was there doing my search, because I needed permission to be on the property, to do my own search in the woods. And he was intrigued by the story and eager to help. And he got a couple of his trustees. And I don't know whether the trustees were white or black. I just know that the three of them did a grid search, and they turned up absolutely no sign of any graves or anything to suggest that it had ever been anything but a vacant lot. And in fact, the sheriff was able to dig up some records that suggested that a sewage or a septic tank had been installed on that property, and that the reason it hadn't been developed might have been simply that it was a septic field.
Fascinating.
So, a dead end, but a dead end that wasn't for lack of trying. I spent a lot of energy trying to find that doggone cemetery.
Wow, I respect the research labor, Mr. Swift. We have been chatting it up. Hell put to shame: the 1921 Murder Farm Massacre and the Horror of America's Second Slavery. Again, published in 2024, so this isn't even that old. My humble opinion, what it's worth, worthless Negro, just like Mr. Manning, they say. If you have any connections to Georgia, if you have like relatives or you live there, anything like that, you should read this book. I mean, wow, it will get... Just for the fear component alone, that is so important, and to have that talked about for the whole book, black people's fear of white people, and justify it. Read this book. Why would Mary Turner? Oh yes, lots to be fearful of, but I would suggest read it. You will learn quite a bit. Man, look for that report from Mr. White alone. Has science conquered the color line. It's lots to look for. Cunning Negras and all kinds of things. It's lots to look for, but woo! What a report. Excellent find, Mr. Swift. I learned a ton. Well, I didn't even know. I didn't know anything about any of this. So I learned a ton, and then just going through and trying to be detailed, I learned quite a bit. Much obliged. And he was so patient. Again, I was stumbling because I wanted to go to court and do my own coverage and everything, and they messed around the dates, so he was really patient with us and trying to get the program scheduled and all of that. And he's about to leave to go camping, so hopefully you can have a great, safe trip, and you can ponder on Mr. Spingarn while you're out there and his spying on black people.
I promise you, Gus, that I will do that.
Much obliged, Mr. Swift. Enjoy the rest of your summer. We will chat it up. I guess we'll look for book number 11, I guess it is, by the time you get back from your trip. Thank you kindly for your time and insight, and we will chat soon.
Hey, thanks so much, Gus. Take care.
You too. Context of White Supremacy. Again, our switcheroony. I got all mixed up because I was thinking, I think this was last month. That's part of it. We were trying to schedule this program in May, and I think when I flipped my calendar forward and was looking at dates, a little ignorant, but I just got confused, and I think I looked at the day and was like, oh yeah, let's do it on Wednesday. It'd be June 3rd, and somehow I got thrown off wrong day and picked a Thursday, which is our Neutralizing Workplace Racism Day. I just got confused, but I will not do that in the future moving forward. Get it correct. Thursday is Workplace Racism Day, not Guest Day, so we'll do it correctly in the future. Anywho, we'll be back on schedule tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Catherine, and hey, we are kind of right lockstep in line. Michelle Alexander, Lyon, she said that people, when they discuss debt peonage, they don't relate it to white supremacy racism. And I said then, curiously, I don't think that's true. I've heard other people talk about debt peonage system, and now I can say I've interviewed 3 different authors, all of them white, who've written about debt peonage. They all directly connected to white supremacy racism. So I don't even know what Michelle Alexander is talking about there. Is she lying? Is she not familiar with this scholarship? We'll give her grace on Mr. Swift's book because that just came out in 2024, so that's way after her work. But I mean, hey, Slavery by Another Name, that's, same time her nonsense was published. Even Robert Perkinson, I told you, there are book reviews that review all 3 of those books together. Michelle Alexander, Slavery by Another Name, Texas Tough by Robert Perkinson, who I interviewed already, 2010, because they were all published at the same time period. All of excuse New Jim Crow, trash, but those other 2 books, they talk about debt peonage as a component of white supremacy racism, and flagrantly so. Anyway, we'll get back on it tomorrow. New Jim Crow, and then Counter Racist Weekly Review on Saturday. Normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I will just say it really quick. Well, never mind. I'll give it on the other side. We'll do quick break, and then we'll get back. I'll let people know about yesterday, why we had to go a little bit early, and then a few thoughts from our guest today, Mr. Earl Swift. Hell put to shame. Anyway, we'll be right back. Context of White Supremacy.
People a few years ago were talking about how Harriet Tubman forcing people at gunpoint. I think that story was made up anyway. That's just my opinion.
Why do you think that?
She's gonna force. Okay, I'm just even looking at the practicality of it.
Okay.
It's too easy for somebody who didn't want to go to just go run up to the house and tell the master, Harriet's down there with a gun. And we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Wow.
I mean, it's very simple. I mean, she's got to go to sleep and whatnot. I mean, she's running an underground railroad. I mean, hey, that whole thing would have been blown out of the water real early. Her whole operation. If she was forcing black people to leave at gunpoint. I think the white supremacists planted that seed out there just a few years ago. Oh, yeah, that's how she got them to go, Harriet rounded them up and marched them down the road to the river with a 6-shooter, you know.
Wow.
I mean, it doesn't add up. With the conditions being what it was and everything at stake, slaves were expensive. I mean, you better believe Master put out $2,000. I mean, in currency on some slave, and he didn't want to go. And Harriet's down there with a gun. I mean, sneaking around in the middle of the night, saying, you know, I know where your cabin is, you know, and if you're not out there, come here. When I come down there with the rest of them, with the other 4 or 5 that I rounded up today, if you're not out there, I'm coming looking for you, and I'm going to shoot you if you don't go. That doesn't even make sense. Nothing about that sounds rings any kind of bell that makes any sense at all.
What about the way I hear it, or the way I've heard that mythology is that the gun would only come out once they got off the plantation. Like, all right, once we leave, there's no turning back because you'll get us caught, you'll get us in trouble. And then the threat of the gun once they've already, you know, got.
Harriet has to go to sleep. You know, she has to eat. I mean, she got 1,001 things to think about, including staying alive. Dogs chasing them and all like that. I mean, they had to run. They had to cross rivers. I mean, those people that got away with Harriet, I mean, got away because they wanted to go. And, man, I mean, it was scary, too, all the way. She couldn't force nobody to go nowhere. Or you know, even if they heard a rumor that she was rounding up people at gunpoint. Is Harriet at gunpoint? I mean, you know, she's the only one got a gun. Because the rest of them had a gun. I mean, hey, they'd have a whole lot going for them. I mean, black people didn't have guns. They didn't have access to them. A lot of them who had seen guns, they'd seen plenty of guns, I mean, in the hands of soldiers and all like that, but they didn't know nothing about even handling no gun. And the kind of guns they had back in those days, my goodness. Half of those cap and ball rifles wouldn't shoot half the time. I mean, no way in the world somebody wanted to get away from Harriet, they couldn't get away. And not only that, you talking about snitching. And Harriet, you talking about shooting me? You know.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade. Again, white guest today. We'll be back on normal schedule. Folks tuning in confused, like I thought it was neutralized workplace. Told you guys yesterday when we did do neutralizing workplace racism, we were here, that we were doing our switcheroo just because I got confused with scheduling. So you'll just be tuning in to hear white guest and not our normal content, but hopefully still constructive. If you were, what's going on? I'm ready to talk about what white people did to me on my job. We did talk about labor though, right? That peonage, same thing, different format. One thing I will get at before we move forward, that was Neely Fuller Jr. that we heard right there, talking about Harriet Tubman. I mentioned before that I did get Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.'s employee records for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Fascinating material it is. It was over 100 pages, well over, so it was a lot to read, very bulky. And this is one of the few records that I've received since I've been doing my FOIA requests and all, even though this was not a FOIA request per se. But this request, everything else has been digital. This is one of those Stone Age where it was a paper request, even paper snail mail request. And then it was fulfilled in a paper snail mail delivery. and well over 100 pages. So like a big bulky info type thing. Like, man, come on. Anyway, and the double whammy on that is, since that's the only one that I didn't get digital, I could read it and all that, but I couldn't really do, like, I couldn't, share, look at this, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Couldn't do any of that. Had to go scan it. And then I had to go scan it. Thanks a lot for that. Like, I don't have anything else to do with my time, energy to go scan dozens of pages. I was finally able to get them scanned, which made it so much easier for me to look at and more convenient, and I could share and all the rest of it. Wow. Since it is neutralizing workplace, or the day we would do neutralizing workplace racism, I'll just read this quick snippet for our Thursday. This is from 1966, I believe, yep, got it there. This is from 1966. This is the recommendation for outstanding performance rating. Neely Fuller Jr., Guard GS4 ranking. Number 1, Private Fuller, as a matter of routine, constantly reads and familiarizes himself with current rules, regulations, and revised operational procedures, resulting in the development of an exceptional, comprehensive knowledge of the duties and responsibilities of his position. This self-acquired added knowledge is utilized by him in the performance of all assignments in an exceptional manner. He has a keen sense of responsibility, which results in the need for very limited direction from his supervisors in carrying out to completion both verbal and written orders. His outstanding performance has resulted in complete confidence on the part of supervisors and reflects only favorably on the Bureau. He possesses exceptional ability to understand orders and procedures and continually applies unusually sound judgment, as demonstrated in his manner both on and off post. Private Fuller has an exceptional awareness of his responsibility, especially in initiating immediate action in disclosing security weaknesses. Over a long period of time, his ability to promptly analyze situations of such nature has resulted in preventative actions taken which have precluded certain security violations as well as safety hazards and tourist incidents. He has been the recipient of verbal and written commendations in recognition of his extremely keen alertness and attention to detail with regard to understanding and application of strict security regulations which enhance Bureau security. The great Neely Fuller Jr. And I can say, like, man, to have over 100 pages, I don't know how many of you all, like, that would be your employment record. If somebody went and got your personnel record after you passed away, I don't know how many folks can say that, oh yeah, I will have 100 plus pages that read just like that. Every page for decades. Neely Fuller Jr. But yes, this is one I'm so glad, because I did procrastinate a little bit. I don't own a scanner, worthless Negro that I am. I don't own a scanner, so I didn't have immediate access to go and scan these documents. But I would have been happier if the white people had scanned them and sent them to me in digital format. But since they didn't, I'm glad I scanned them. Wow. Maybe I'll share some more as we proceed. But the great Neely Fuller Jr. Let's see. The program from today specifically. Can I go back to Joel Spingarn? Now, I didn't share this with the white guest. I'm not about educating white people. This is a white journalist. You can travel to Georgia and kidnap your family members and offspring to go help you research. You wrote a book. You include Joel Spingarn in it, so you can go research Mr. Spingarn to see what's this dude all about. Now, I've talked about this before. Anyone who's heard the cows, we've mentioned Joel Spingarn. He comes up in the book club all the time. That's one thing where I can say reading nonfiction is more important than watching television. I'm certain you probably could learn a few things that are actually true and relevant reading fiction, but I think you're going to learn a lot more reading nonfiction because the element of entertainment and amusement has been mostly removed. That's not in the equation generally if we're talking about nonfiction works. Might even be more concerned about accuracy, should be, than keeping you entertained. Fiction. We need truth. Strive for accuracy. That's what we need. At any rate, reading nonfiction and being the biography kings, I know Joel Spingarn, and being the one who uncovered the FBI files on Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, FBI files on Neely Fuller Jr., Gus T., I am a COINTELPRO expert. I am supposed to know this. I do know this. And biography kings. It is only because Gus T. is a victim of white supremacy. I don't have massive resources and help. This would have been a double whammy pick. We would have already read one of the biographies on Joel Spingarn. Maybe that's just down the road. Time is right and exact. We get to it. That is coming. That's going to be, everybody will have an easy reference. What you mean Joel Spingarn is COINTELPRO and Spingarn? We're going to all have an easy reference soon enough. And guess, because white people have written books about this. I'm not going to give you a whole listing, but I'll give one now that I'm just talking to you all. This is for non-white people, victims of white supremacy. Let's see here. So what page am I, or what am I reading from? I'm reading from Close Ranks, Major Joel E. Spingarn. Even that right there, like, do I really need to read anything else? What, say it again, Brother Gus. What the name? Major Joel E. Spingarn. I think if you go back on this one, I'm even going to point it out. One of us was pronouncing Mr. Spingarn's name correctly, and I believe one of us was not. Back up off me. I'm talking to all of you, really. Back up off me. The report again, Close Ranks, Major Joel E. Spingarn, and the two souls of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, not going to read the full report. Oh, okay, dokes. Here we go. Section number 2. Joel E. Spingarn. Now, even that, we got different spelling of his name here. I'm just pointing it out because I said something about it. So we got at the title of the report, it's spelled Spingarn. In the body of this report, it's spelled Springarn. I think that is misspelled. I could be in error. In fact, I'm going to double check right now, just to be sure, but I think it's Spingarn, not Springarn. But let's see. Yep, I was correct. Spingarn is correct. That he just added an extra R, spring as in the season, and that is not how his name is spelled. Joel E. Spingarn, one of the early movers of the NAACP, had been promoted to the rank of major and given command of the 311th Infantry Battalion during the war. World War I, that would be. Just prior to his being shipped to the European front in the fall of 1917, Spingarn suffered a severe ulcer attack requiring hospitalization. Following the recovery, he was assigned a desk job with the Army's Military Intelligence Branch in the District of Columbia, to which he reported on the 27th of May, 1918. His duties to carry out intelligence activities with respect to monitoring left-wing radicalism in general and Afro-American subversive tendencies in particular. Footnote number 6, just because I did just say back up off me. This is one I would even take the time to give you the footnote, like for real. Back up off me, all of you. Footnote number 6. judged by content of extant military memoranda bearing on Spingarn's actions, the greatest portion of his time appears to have been expended in the latter category. That would mean spying on subversive Negroes. Now, that word even pops up because Gus T., COINTELPRO expert, I just told you all a couple weeks ago, Dr. Francis Welsing's files from 1951, that's the word that's stamped on her vial. Subversive. Matter of fact, the full term is subversive control. I already told you the Department of the Army, they had files on Dr. Welsing. I have to even look to see if Spingarn was probably looking at files, if not on Dr. Welsing, on her family. I bet money on that. Anyway, this is just one report. There are many reports that talk about Spingarn's activities. If you want to go check it out, this report that I just read from, if you want the title again, Close Ranks, Major Joel E. Spingarn and the Two Souls of W.E.B. Du Bois. You can get that. Like I said, this is just one of many. This is not exclusive. This is talked about widespread. And like for reals, I'm going to contact Mr. Swift like, hey man, do your research, this type of thing, because you all do this sort of thing all the time. Gus T., you don't know what you're talking about. You're up here talking fool stuff. Remember, we had Cameron McWhirter. He mentioned Red Summer of 1919, all that violence, white terrorist violence against black people. We had Cameron McWhirter on the program then where he said, Gus T., you up here lying, talking about the white killers who bragged about killing Emmett Till. You lying that they did some newspaper article bragging about that. No, that really happened. Same way we get retired firefighter. What you mean, Gus T. out here talking about some Dylan Roof had an AR-15? That's not what I said. Peyton Gendron had an AR-15 in Buffalo when he slaughtered 10 black people at Tops 2022 May. Facts. That's what I said. You all do that sort of thing, white and non-white, with Gus T. all the time. So I am going to contact him. And even if I could request a favor, anybody, if you listen to this program, contact Mr. Swift, drop him an email, and hey man, you were in error. And dare I say, act of white supremacy, racism, getting uppity, telling a black person they don't know what they're talking about on a subject where you're not informed. You don't know enough about Major Joel Spingarn. You don't even know enough to pronounce his name accurately, apparently. Drop him an email, particularly if any of the folks who love correcting Gus T. Hey, here's a white man. You don't know what you're talking about, and/or you're practicing white supremacy racism. His email, earlswift@gmail.com, EARL Swift, SWIFT@gmail.com. Drop him an email and let him know. Hey man, it's lots of information out there. You can get the report I just read. You can do your own research. Gus T. was accurate on that one. He might be a shiftless, sleep and eat all day Negro. That might be true. But at least on this one thing, that Negro was accurate and you were wrong. Maybe even, hey, make a compensatory investment request. Tell Mr. Swift that. Invest. This is listener-supported radio. Black male who read your book and was informed. Invest in his program and write an email. Come back and acknowledge I was in error. I'm a journalist and I didn't even do enough research. Maybe write a book about Joel Spingarn spying on the Negroes, like James Weldon Johnson. Probably got a whole file on him. COINTELPRO expert. COINTELPRO. As a matter of fact, I have this in writing. Gus T., COINTELPRO expert. Anyway, things that I thought were important, that would be one right there. And even what he said, what you mean, the NAACP? Number one, how many of you all, that I've been talking about that on the cows for years, Joel Spingarn spying on black people, did you all know that? They still give out the NAACP award with his name on it. I've mentioned that for years. That is the system of white supremacy racism. Either you have lots of non-white people, like this 1921 massacre that he wrote about. You have lots of non-white people who, I don't know nothing about that. Joel Spring, you have lots of non-white. Joe who? Joe Spring? What? Who you? What? You gonna have a whole lot of that. And even if they do know him, spied on, you talking crazy. You sound like that old crazy Dr. Wells. Stop talking crazy. That's the success of white people. That's when you got people who have been terrorized. And even if you do find out about that F word I've been talking about the whole time, because I've seen that in my own COINTELPRO research. I told you all, this is kind of scary sometimes. Wow, these are apex security agencies. I just told you, Major Joel Spingarn. That's what I said. That's kind of scary. I ain't got no firearms. Go against the U.S. military, trained white killers. That's scary. That alone, I don't want nothing to do. Let's read that Harry Potter, man. We're gonna read the fiction. I don't want nothing to do with that. I'm gonna read the fiction. Hate you get. Let's read. Yeah, we're gonna read that one. Woo! Ain't gonna get no trouble reading Angie Smith. Might get in some trouble reading about Joel Spingarn and COINTELPRO and spying on black people for the U.S. military. They might have to spy on you. Facts. What else did I think was important? The trustees going out to search for the field. Now, that is important if they could have located it, but like, wow. And I'm thinking too, were these, because he said it too, I don't know if they were black or white. That's what I was thinking. Like, dang, did they end up getting, talk about full circle. They went and got more peons to go out. White man doing a book about all this. Let's get out. Get out there. Let's get the chain gang together. We'll go out and do a search in the field all day long in the hot Georgia sun. That's what I was thinking, but he said he didn't know, so I guess they could have been white trustees. The section about the dogs, literally, I just had people have talked about other research, talking about the white people's usage of hounds. Again, that's something we've been here for 17 years. We've talked about that in detail. I was not aware of that until I started doing the cows. And even recently, some of the research I've seen on that is kind of within the last 7 years or so, kind of close to the Rona. I just posted Dr. Madeline Wazelchek. Pronounced her last name correctly and everything. She was a guest on the program, I believe, in 2023. And we talked about her dissertation. She was on Democracy Now! That same year. We talked about her report about the widespread, and the Ferguson. That's another one. That's two, I'm going to say on the record, that's 2 acts of white supremacy racism where he immediately disputed me, which is the same thing you all do. Gusty, you don't know what the hell you talking about. Ferguson putting the dogs on black children. No, literally, the FBI, who I can say now because of my FOIA work this year, I'm kind of familiar with the FBI. At least they got more credibility than Gus T. The FBI published a report talking about how in Missouri, Ferguson, St. Louis County, they only sick the dogs on the black people. And I think it was the children specifically. Matter of fact, hold on. Let me see. Can I get Dr. Cambon? I'm going to get 2 seconds just for Dr. Cambon. Let's see.
Our people are very serious about not being very serious. Meanwhile, white people are very serious about playing hardball against us. And this hardball is called genocide.
Much obliged, Dr. Cambon. I didn't even need the full 30 seconds. I could just say it again, back up off me. My request would be get the email because these are verified facts. This was in the news. This one, I have a much greater lean to Mr. Swift. Either you're an incompetent journalist or you're a racist. My lean is on the latter. You're practicing racism. You didn't see that FBI, all that report and white hooliganism, because it was white people running around the streets in Ferguson. I mean, hands up, don't shoot me. You don't remember any of that? You didn't pay attention to all that as a journalist? And even if you didn't, my black brother Eric Holder, who said, are we a nation of cowards? when Eric Holder came out in 2015 and Gus T, get the dirt off my shoulders, I was accurate to the year all the way through. Accurate to the year all the way through. Mike Brown's murder, and then when the FBI report came out the following year, 2015. What does it say? 2015 Department of Justice report on the Ferguson Police Department revealed a disturbing pattern of unconstitutional canine use. All recorded incidents of police dog bites involved African Americans. I didn't stutter. My memory is tremendous. My memory is tremendous. I don't know about you all. I'm talking about listeners, investors, Earl Swift. My memory is tremendous. And my focus on counter-racist, bar none. Bar none. We talked about all of this in detail and then did multiple programs on the dog bites where I have mentioned those black children in Ferguson being chomped specifically, and I mentioned Mr. Shaheed. You can go back and look at the visuals. 2014, right after Mike Brown was left in the street for 4 hours plus, Mr. Shaheed, black male, when they were out protesting, you can see he's got stuffed animals. What type of animals? He got the dogs. I didn't know why he had the dogs at the time. I had to do more research, like Mr. Swift, who could have been practicing racism, but I had to do more research. Oh, Mr. Shaheed had the dogs on his neck because they put the dogs on the niggers in Ferguson, in St. Louis, in Missouri. They put the dogs on Michael. What's the rest of the report read? It said, investigators concluded these attacks were used to inflict punishment rather than counter physical threats. That sounds like that sadism again, but now we talking about 2015. We ain't talking about 1921. 100% bias in every incident where a police dog bit a suspect and racial information was recorded. The victim was black. Targeting minors. Is this what I said? I think this is like all what I said. And suspected racist Mr. Swift snickered. You know, which is, like I said, that's the same thing you all do. Oh, Gus T, you eating, sleeping nigger, you don't know nothing. Shut up. Talking to me like I'm Clyde Manning. You don't know what you talking about. Shut up, Gus T. You don't know what you talking about. Oh, it's not. Oh, you have an impeccable memory for things that happened 12 years ago to the date. Damn right, man. That's for all of you. Retired firefighter, that's for all of you. Targeting minors, police used dogs to attack unarmed black juveniles. One incident involved an unarmed 14-year-old and another involved a 16-year-old hiding in a closet who was bitten. This was on NPR too. Like I said, talked about all this in great detail many times before. But that's one, particularly any of you all that have incorrectly called out Gus T. You don't know what you're talking about, Gus T. And then it turned out I did know what I was talking about and was correct. Email Earl Swift, since you all like to correct people. Hey, the people that need the most correcting are practicing white supremacy racism. That would not be Gus T. Get his email. In fact, I can give you his phone number if you really want to be, on the ball about it. His email, earlswift@gmail.com. That's two massive either acts of white supremacy racism, or it could even be both, because even if it's I'm ignorant, I don't remember, or I don't know about the FBI report talking about the dogs chomping black people in Missouri, where you lived, or I don't know nothing about Joel Spingarn, who I wrote about. Either or, if I'm ignorant, why are you laughing and why is the default? Same thing you all do. Nigger, you don't know what you talking about. You ignorant, you stupid, you sleep and eat nigger, you don't know nothing. That shouldn't be the default. It should be, hey, I'm ignorant, I'm still learning, I'll have to research. I can't co-sign on what you're saying. You could be ignorant, but you also could be right. Either way, I don't know. I'm going to have to go research. And that's all I can say on that. Real short. He didn't do that. He got racist.earlswift@gmail.com. Both of those. You can verify to make sure Gus isn't lying. You don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Swift, or you're practicing racism. Tell him to invest in the cows, and you should contact Gus to even come back on the program and or write Gus T. I was wrong on 2 accounts. Dang. Maybe even need to revise my book and include Joel Spingarn, military spy military spy on the Negras. And then hat tip to Gus T for pointing that out. Even in the face of my snickering objections, he pointed that out. Let's see. What else did I think was important from this one? The skin gangs. I think I've heard that before. I'm going to have to go back and look. They have different setups on the plantation before the Civil War and after, where they wouldn't give black people money. They would give them like trinkets, fabric, whatever, tokens, and they could play their games and lose all their money, so they keep them in debt. But just even that terminology, that this is all about mistreating people on the basis of skin color that we say are not white, to even that's the metaphor for our lie and our scheme to keep these black males in greater confinement, basically, on our plantation. We call it a skin gang. Welsing moment again, right? Even that metaphor, when they say, gets under my skin, everything getting back to what this is all about. Mistreating people on the basis of color, and white people, lack of melanin. The knowing how to work a Negro, that passage, we talked about that. White people are not ignorant about racism. He said it was everybody. It was even the prosecutors, the white people that were supposed to be on the side of justice. Even they, now we all know what it is to work a Negro. I'm going to tell you, that's another one. 2026-1921. If you're classified as white, white people know what it is to work a Negro. And a major component of that section was white people know that black people are afraid of them, and we should be. White people can weaponize that fear in so many different ways to get us to cooperate with the system of white supremacy racism. Mr. Fuller talked about intelligent fear. We are correct to be afraid of racist man, racist woman, racist child. We are victims and in a very vulnerable position. Intelligent fear is recognizing that fear and accepting that we have an assignment to produce justice. We advance towards that even in the face of real fear and danger. Get your courage up and move towards our assignment, which is not name-calling and criticizing black people. Let's see. The sadism, he even pointed that out. These were not just, I'm going to get a gun and bang, you're dead, nigger. This is, I want you to think about, and in fact, even the way, I'm going to tie rocks around you. I'm going to tie wire around you. I'm going to bind your hands. I'm going to do the same thing to your other niggers so you can watch it happen to them, and throw you in the water alive and do the same thing to you. What? What? Again, you could just kill him. Bang, you're dead. It's a whole lot. It's way, in fact, he said, if they hadn't done all that, Mr. Johnny Plantation, they wouldn't even have got caught. He could have just, bang, you're dead. Bang, you're dead. Bang, you're dead. Bury him on the land. We would have never heard of this again. They had to go through all that. We got to bind you and tie rocks on you and put a fan on you. Some of that's the same thing they did to Emmett Till. Because we got to do all that. That's how they ended up getting caught. I said, that's white culture. He was, what do you mean? That's white culture. That's white. John Bird, you see the same thing over and over. Amadou Diallo, that's white culture. Sadistic. We love to see the Negro leave Mike Brown's body out in the street for 4 hours. Or we sick the dogs on the black people. And I thought it was significant. He called the black brother an emotional zombie. He didn't call him a victim. He was talking about Clyde Manning there. That's the black male who is forced to go out and help this white man, Mr. Johnny, racist, kill these 11 black males. He didn't call him a victim. He called them an emotional or was he an emotional zombie? And that wasn't a quote. That was his word choices. I said, what? There's a whole history, well documented, of white people as a component of white supremacy racism, calling black people all over the world zombies. I am very resistant, particularly in this situation. You're talking about someone who is a victim who has no logical choice at all. I'm a victim of white supremacy. Whatever I pick, I'm going to die. If I kill Mr. Johnny, I'm not just going to die. They are going to torture me. You talk, we're going to castrate you, chop off your fingers, set you on fire. It's no. What I just ain't going to be, we just going to kill you. You done killed a white man? Oh, and we might kill your whole family and make them suffer too. So that's one option. We could go kill these black people, and then they're going to put me in jail. Might kill me too. They have death penalty, so that's one option where I die. Or I don't do it at all, and Mr. Johnny kills me, which he already said. Now, what, and then tell me that, well, you got options now. You're an emotional zombie if you go along with it and say, well, I guess I'll help you go kill these niggers. I'm an emotional zombie? I'm an emotional zombie? Like, I'm a victim of white supremacy. Fuller say, hey, many people are to blame. The people that are most to blame are white. Being less to blame does not make you no zombie unless you're a privileged black male. Zombie. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I reckon we can leave it there with things that I thought were important from this broadcast specifically. You can go back and get the report on the DAR, the many programs that we've done about those hounds as a component of white supremacy racism, even reminding me of Romaine Gary, White Dog, which we read during the summertime. A racist dog that literally has been trained. Oh, and it's a police dog. It's a police dog that's been trained to chomp on black people. In fact, that came up this year. Dr. Joshua Clark Davis, the Police Against the Movement, he said specifically those dogs in Alabama, Birmingham, that chomped on the black children in 1963, he said those dogs were trained in Baltimore, Maryland, and that they had just opened that training facility as a response to Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Ella Baker, uppity black people saying we're going to work against racism, and white people say, no, you're not. No, you're not. We know what, matter of fact, we're going to stick the dogs on you. That's what we're going to do. They went and trained that. They didn't. I said that was one of the more stunning things that I learned this year. I thought Bull Connor and them had those dogs like for decades, forever. And he said, nope, they just got those dogs waiting, really. Saw Dr. King in them and said, oh, yeah, we going to get these niggers. You come down here and think you're going to do some protesting and civil rights and marching and demonstrating. Right in the archives. Back up off Gus T. Go to everybody in the known universe. Victim of white supremacy. But I mean, I've been on my assignment. I don't know what you've been doing. I've been on my assignment. Invest in the cows. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button in the top right corner. Beneath the button, you'll see the links: Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal. Cash App address cash.app/$ the cows. And again, for this one, your investment can be drop that email to Earl Swift. Let him get a good 20. I mean, hey, how long does it take to send an email? Y'all think I'm lazy, and I mean literally. Our investors, listeners, think Gus T is lazy and slept all day long and rolled out of bed before this program started and got ready to broadcast. Middle finger to you all. But if that's the case, since it's about let's be productive, I broadcasted for 3 hours. You could take 5 minutes and send an email, Earl Swift. You practiced racism or you're incompetent. Either way, invest in the cows. And tell Gusty I was wrong. Double. Joel Spingarn pronounced his name correctly. Yes, he did spy on the niggers. Major Spingarn. And yes, my other one as well, in Gus T being accurate on both accounts with what I had to say. So anyway, drop Mr. Swift, Earl Swift at gmail.com. Drop him an email and let him know he needs to get correct, make an amendment with what he had. He was about accuracy, right? He did that at the beginning of the program. He said it's not correct to say that no other white person had been indicted for the debt peonage, that it did happen a few times and it wasn't all that encompassing. But hey, you were wrong about Mr. Spingarn. You were wrong about the hounds in Ferguson. And I mean, that, like I said, that latter, that's big news. I mean, Eric Holder got on TV about all that, man. Attorney General Obeezy was in the White House. Anyhoodles, much obliged for the folks tuning in. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy, even though it was not our typical Thursday offering. Hopefully constructive either way. We will be here mañana, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Session number 8. Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. Mass incarceration in the age of colorblindness. Now, if you all want to get out your markers and talk about what's accurate or not, that should be one half at it, because it is rife with errors, lies, lots of all, so you could have your pick. That's it. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy racism. We need high-functioning brain computers, Gusty and all of us. We need high-functioning brain computers to solve the problem. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. You let racist suspects like Earl Swift, that's their argument. That ain't the victim side of the chessboard. Now, not all white people is racist. Nah. It'll sound suspicious because don't nobody say that but Whitey. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop name-calling, cursing people classified as black. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in. Get that email to Earl Swift at gmail.com.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my condition. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.